If you're ready to rest, you're in the right place. Close your eyes, relax your body, and drift into a slower time. And if you feel like these videos are of any use to you, then you can like and subscribe, but only if you really feel like it. And now, let's begin. You're jolted awake, not by the gentle hum of your smartphone alarm, but the cacophony of a village rooster, loudly proclaiming the start of another day in the Bronze Age. Welcome to the wild world of 3300–1200 BCE, a time when your morning routine involves a lot less espresso and Wi-Fi and a lot more grit and grime. First things first, let's talk shelter. Your cozy, modern apartment has been swapped out for a snug little hut. The walls are made of mud bricks, painstakingly crafted by mixing clay and straw, then left to dry in the sun. A process that could take days, given the fickle nature of Bronze Age weather forecasts, read non-existent. Your roof is a charming thatched affair, which is great for letting the rain in and keeping the heat out. The Bronze Age was all about open-plan living, but not in the chic way you know. With no glass windows because, well, glass wasn't a thing yet, you're relying on small openings that let in light and, unfortunately, the cold. Now, on to breakfast. Forget about the convenience of a quick bowl of cereal or a grab-and-go smoothie. You're starting from scratch, literally. Your morning meal begins with the back-breaking task of grinding grains into flour using a stone quern, a process that makes your arms ache just thinking about it. Archaeologists have found these querns scattered across ancient sites, often worn down from years of relentless grinding. Your daily grind is not a metaphor here, it's a sweaty reality. And what are you grinding? Likely emmer wheat or barley, staples of the Bronze Age diet. These grains were hardy enough to withstand the less-than-ideal growing conditions of the time. The yield was modest, with emmer producing about 1,000–2,500 kilograms per hectare. So, you're not exactly looking at a cornucopia of abundance. After grinding, you mix the flour with water to form a doughy blob, then cook it over an open fire. Voila, bread. Well, a flat, dense, and slightly charred version of it, but hey, you're carbo-loading like it's 1999 BCE. Clothing is your next concern, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but there's no such thing as fast fashion here. Your wardrobe consists of garments made from wool or linen, both of which require an entire community's worth of effort to produce. Let's start with wool. Sheep are sheared by hand, of course, yielding a rough, greasy fleece that must be washed, carded, spun, and woven. Each step is a labor-intensive process that takes hours, if not days. Linen is no picnic either. It comes from flax, which needs to be harvested, retted, a fancy word for rotting, and then painstakingly beaten and spun. By the way, you're doing all of this by hand, using tools that are, shall we say, rustic. Spindle whorls and loom weights have been found at Bronze Age sites, showing just how much of your life would be spent in repetitive, manual labor. If you're lucky, your clothes are dyed using natural pigments, but don't expect a wide palette. You're more earthy tones than neon chic. And just when you're ready to throw in the towel and hope for some downtime, it's time to think about survival essentials. Water, for instance, does not flow easily from a tap. Depending on your village's location, you might be drawing it from a nearby stream or well. The average distance to a water source could be several kilometers, and you'd be hauling it back in clay jars or animal skins. This is dehydrating work, and you're not even getting any steps on your fitness tracker for it. While you're out and about, let's tackle another myth, the pastoral paradise. It's easy to romanticize this era as a time of simple living, but the reality is, life was anything but leisurely. The Bronze Age economy was largely agrarian, and that meant everyone was expected to contribute. Farming was not just a full-time job, it was a way of life. Ploughing fields with wooden or bronze-tipped ploughs, sowing seeds by hand, and tending to crops required a community effort. The yield was unpredictable, subject to the whims of weather and soil conditions. Oh, and if you think you could just supplement your diet through hunting and gathering, think again. By the Bronze Age, large game was becoming increasingly scarce, and the skills required to hunt successfully were not something you picked up overnight. Gathering wild fruits, nuts, and berries was a precarious endeavor, often yielding little reward for a lot of effort. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, you're reminded that the Bronze Age wasn't just tough, it was also brutally hierarchical. Social structures were rigid, with power concentrated in the hands of chieftains or kings. These leaders wielded their influence over small fiefdoms, extracting tributes and labor from those beneath them. Bronze itself was a status symbol, a blend of copper and tin that required extensive trade networks to acquire. It wasn't just a material, it was a mark of prestige. Weapons, tools, and jewelry made of bronze were coveted, showcasing wealth and power. So, as you trudge through your day, grinding grains, tending livestock, and avoiding the ire of your social superiors, you're living a life that's far from the idyllic scenes depicted in textbooks. Instead, it's a constant hustle for survival, with little room for error. Each task is a reminder of the skill and endurance required to make it through just one day. And as the shadows lengthen, you might find yourself longing for the simple luxury of a soft bed and a warm shower. But, for now, you lay your head down on a straw mat, exhausted and perhaps with a newfound appreciation for the conveniences of the 21st century. As you drift off on your straw mat, pondering the sheer tenacity it takes to survive a single day in the Bronze Age, let's zoom in on the heart of this ancient economy, agriculture and trade. While you're wishing for a mattress and central heating, your Bronze Age counterparts are up and at 'em, elbow deep in the kind of work that makes modern office jobs look like a picnic. This isn't your cozy farmer's market kind of agriculture either. We're talking about the gritty, life-or-death kind that underpins every aspect of life. Start with the barter system, the OG of trade mechanisms. Forget about swiping credit cards. The currency of the day could be anything from grain to livestock to, yes, bronze. Picture this. You need a new axe head because your old one's worn down from hacking through the dense, unforgiving forest that surrounds your village. What do? You don't head over to Home Depot. You trade a portion of your grain harvest with the local smith, who's worked out a deal with a neighbouring village to get his hands on some tin, the magic ingredient that turns copper into the much-coveted bronze. Bronze tools and weapons? They're the cat's pajamas in this era. Not only do they make farming and warfare more efficient, but they also serve as a status symbol. A gleaming bronze sickle isn't just for cutting wheat. It's a shiny badge of honour, a way to show your neighbours you're not just surviving, you're thriving. In fact, the production of bronze itself is a testament to the complex trade networks that spanned the ancient world. Copper could be sourced locally in some areas, but tin? That was a whole different story. Some archaeologists believe tin came from as far away as Cornwall in England, meaning your average Bronze Age village was plugged into a trade network that wouldn't be out of place in a modern supply chain. And here's where we bust the myth of the Simple's village economy. You might picture these places as isolated hamlets, but they were anything but. Long-distance trade routes crisscrossed continents, connecting disparate cultures through the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. From the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley, these routes were the lifelines of civilization. For instance, the Uluburun shipwreck, dating back to the late Bronze Age, was discovered off the coast of Turkey, carrying a cargo that included copper ingots, glass beads, and ivory. It's a floating microcosm of the diverse trade that powered this era, a testament to the interconnectedness of ancient societies. Trade wasn't just about goods, it was about relationships, alliances, and sometimes rivalries. These networks were the backbone of economic stability, but they were also fraught with tension. Control over resources like tin and copper was a high-stakes game, with regional powers vying for supremacy. This was no quaint barter system. It was cutthroat capitalism, Bronze Age style. You'd better believe that, if a chieftain could corner the market on bronze production, he'd do it in a heartbeat, leveraging his advantage to extract tributes and consolidate power. And let's not forget the social fabric woven through all this economic activity. The village might seem egalitarian at first glance, but peel back the layers and you'll find a rigid hierarchy lurking beneath. Chieftains and elite classes controlled the flow of goods, while the average villager toiled away, their labour feeding the engine of trade and agriculture. Sure, everyone pulled their weight, but the spoils weren't exactly shared equally. Wealth, like bronze itself, was concentrated at the top, a sharp reminder that economic disparity is not a modern invention. Resource management was a delicate balancing act. One bad harvest could spell disaster, not just for individual families, but for entire communities. There was no government safety net to catch you if you fell. Storage facilities were critical, with granaries serving as the linchpins of survival. Archaeological finds reveal that some villages, had sophisticated systems for storing surplus grain and insurance policy against famine. It's a stark contrast to the romantic notion of a pastoral utopia where everyone lived in carefree abundance. And while we're on the topic of myths, let's tackle the notion that these trade routes were mere dirt paths trodden by lone traders. The reality is far more complex. These were bustling arteries of commerce, with caravans and ships transporting goods over land and sea. Navigating these routes required skill and savvy, as traders had to contend with everything from bandits to natural barriers. The rewards were high, but so were the risks. One wrong move, and you could lose your cargo, your livelihood, or even your life. It's easy to romanticize the Bronze Age as a time of simplicity, but the truth is, it was a world of dizzying complexity. The economic systems in place were as intricate as any modern financial market, with multiple players and moving parts. Each transaction was a puzzle piece in a larger picture, a testament to human ingenuity and resilience in the face of daunting odds. As you mull over these ancient realities, remember that the past isn't just a foreign country. It's a mirror reflecting the timeless dance of survival and ambition. And as the sun climbs higher, casting its light on the fields and forests that sustain life, you're reminded that the more things change, the more they stay the same. As the sun climbs higher, casting its light on the fields and forests that sustain life, you're reminded that the more things change, the more they stay the same. So, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Bronze Age social dynamics, a realm where power suits were made of fur and the political arena was as cutthroat as any modern boardroom. First off, let's talk about the chieftain, the head honcho, the big cheese, the original influencer of the village. Chieftains wielded power over their domains like a medieval CEO, except their board meetings often involved more spears and less PowerPoint. With political clout derived from their control over resources like bronze and grain, these leaders were the linchpins of community life. They didn't just sit around drinking mead all day, they were busy making deals, organizing defense, and ensuring their village didn't end up as a footnote in someone else's conquest. Think of them as the original multitaskers, juggling diplomacy, warfare, and economic management like a pro. Their power wasn't just about brute force, though. It was also about charisma and cunning. You didn't get to be a chieftain by accident. You had to be shrewd, able to rally people to your cause and maintain a delicate balance of fear and loyalty. And if you think modern politics is a snake pit, imagine a time when a leadership challenge might literally cost you your head. It was a high-stakes game, and the winners were those who could navigate the treacherous waters of alliances, betrayals, and tribal politics with finesse. But the chieftain wasn't the only player in town. Enter the shaman, the spiritual guide, and village mystic, wielding a different kind of power. While the chieftain dealt in the tangible land, food, bronze, the shaman dealt in the intangible, the spirits, the gods, the forces of nature. They were the village's go-to for everything, from healing potions to advice on whether the gods were in favor of that risky raid on the neighboring village. These spiritual advisors held sway over the community's mental and emotional well-being, a sort of Bronze Age therapist cum fortune teller. Shamans were believed to commune with the spiritual world, a crucial role in a time when understanding the whims of the gods could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest and a catastrophic famine. They interpreted omens, conducted rituals, and often held the power to influence communal decisions. If a shaman said the gods were angry, you'd better believe the village paid attention. Their influence was a subtle undercurrent that could steer the course of village life in unexpected ways. Now, let's debunk a myth, the idea of Bronze Age societies as egalitarian havens where everyone sang kumbaya around the campfire. Spoiler alert, they weren't. Sure, at first glance, it might seem like everyone pulled their weight contributing to the village's survival. And in a way, they did. But peel back the layers, and you'll find a social hierarchy that would make any social climber weep with envy. At the top, you had your chieftains and shamans, as we've discussed. They were the power brokers, the decision-makers, the ones who got to sit in the metaphorical big chair. Below them were the warriors, the muscle of the operation, tasked with defending the village and expanding its influence. These guys weren't just muscle-bound brutes. They were trained fighters with a vested interest in the community's success. After all, a thriving village meant more loot, more prestige, and, yes, more bronze. Then there were the artisans and craftsmen, the unsung heroes who transformed raw materials into the tools and weapons that kept the village running. From bronzesmiths to potters, these skilled workers were crucial to the village's economy, producing everything from daily necessities to luxury items that could be traded for much-needed resources. Their work was labour-intensive and required skill passed down through generations, a testament to human ingenuity in the face of scarcity. At the bottom of the pile were the farmers and labourers, toiling away in the fields and tending the herds. They were the backbone of the village, their hard work literally putting food on the table. It was a tough life, dictated by the rhythms of nature and the whims of those above them. They were the unsung majority, the ones who kept the village's heart beating, often for little recognition and even less reward. So, while it's tempting to imagine Bronze Age villages as idyllic communities where everyone shared equally, the reality was more complex. Power and resources were concentrated in the hands of a few, and social mobility was limited. Wealth was not evenly distributed. The top tiers enjoyed the fruits of the community's labour, while the rest toiled to maintain the status quo. It's a familiar story, one that echoes through history and reminds us that the struggle for equality is as old as civilization itself. As for communal decision-making, it was a mix of practicality and politics. Decisions weren't made by committee, they were dictated by those in power. But that doesn't mean the average villager didn't have a say. The chieftain might call a gathering, a sort of village assembly where issues could be aired, grievances voiced, and plans debated. It was the Bronze Age version of a town hall meeting, less C-SPAN and more Game of Thrones. These gatherings were a critical part of village life, a chance for the community to come together and hash out the issues of the day. Whether it was deciding on a new trade route or planning the defence against a rival tribe, these meetings were where the village's future was shaped. It was a democratic process of sorts, but one heavily influenced by the power dynamics at play. The chieftain's word held weight, and the shaman's guidance was often sought, but the people's voice could not be entirely ignored. After all, a leader without followers is just a guy taking a walk. And let's not overlook the gender dynamics at play. While men typically held the positions of overt power, women were far from passive bystanders. They played critical roles within the community, from managing households to participating in trade and crafting. In some cultures, women could even hold positions of spiritual authority, acting as priestesses or oracles. Their influence, though often less visible, was nonetheless vital to the village's survival. So, what's the takeaway here? The Bronze Age was a time of complexity and contradiction, where the romantic notion of a simple, egalitarian society gives way to the harsh reality of hierarchy and power struggles. It was a world where community and individuality were in constant tension, where survival depended on the delicate balance of human relationships and the relentless demands of the environment. As the midday sun beats down, illuminating the fields where villagers toil, you're left with a deeper understanding of the intricate social web that held these ancient communities together. And as we continue this journey through the Bronze Age, keep in mind that the story is far from over. There are more layers to peel back, more myths to debunk, and more truths to uncover about this fascinating period in history. So stay tuned, because the afternoon promises even more revelations about the complex tapestry of life in a Bronze Age village. As the afternoon sun casts long shadows over the bustling Bronze Age village, it's time to explore the spiritual and cultural tapestry woven through this ancient world. Forget the serene, incense-filled temples you might be picturing. Bronze Age spirituality was a heady mix of mysticism, ritual, and sometimes a good bit of communal chaos. You see, religion wasn't just a Sunday affair. It was an all-consuming way of life that seeped into every nook and cranny of existence, from the way you planted your crops to how you painted your pottery. Let's start by peeling back the layers on the rituals that punctuated daily life. These weren't just quaint ceremonies, they were crucial events that could determine the fate of a community. Take the ritual of animal sacrifice, for example. Far from being a barbaric relic of the past, these sacrifices were seen as essential communications with the divine, a way to curry favour or seek guidance from the gods. Archaeological digs have uncovered altars stained with the blood of animals, evidence of these solemn ceremonies. For instance, in Minoan Crete, bulls were often the star players in these rituals. Think of them as the ancient world's VIPs, whose sacrifice was believed to ensure fertility and prosperity. But before you start imagining a scene out of Indiana Jones, let's debunk the myth of the rampant bloodthirstiness. While sacrifice was common, it wasn't a daily occurrence. These rituals were reserved for special occasions, like major agricultural milestones or in times of crisis. The goal? To keep the gods happy and, by extension, ensure the survival of the village. It's a stark reminder that the Bronze Age mindset was less about individual spirituality and more about collective survival. Speaking of gods, the Bronze Age pantheon was as crowded as a music festival. From the Mesopotamian Anu, the sky god, to the Egyptian Ra, the sun deity, every civilization had its own celestial VIP list. These gods weren't aloof beings sitting in some divine executive suite. They were intimately involved in the daily grind of human affairs. Mythology was less about entertainment and more about explaining the inexplicable. Why did the river flood, destroying your crops? Why did disease strike your village? The gods were the ultimate scapegoats, their whims blamed for every misfortune and celebrated for every success. But here's the kicker. These myths, while fantastical, were also powerful tools of social cohesion. They provided a shared narrative, a common ground for villagers to rally around. Think of them as the original social media influencers, shaping beliefs, behaviors, and even alliances. Archaeologists have found tablets and inscriptions detailing these myths, showing how they were passed down through generations, evolving with each retelling. It's a potent reminder that stories have always been the glue that holds societies together, whether they're told around a Bronze Age fire or shared on Instagram today. And let's not forget the art. The art. While you might envision crude stick figures etched onto cave walls, Bronze Age art was surprisingly sophisticated. From the intricate gold jewelry of Mycenaean Greece to the exquisite pottery of the Indus Valley, artistic expression was as diverse as it was detailed. These weren't just pretty trinkets, they were status symbols, a way to show off your wealth, your power, and your connection to the divine. The materials used, gold, lapis lazuli, ivory, were often sourced from far-flung regions, a testament to the extensive trade networks that linked these ancient civilizations. But art wasn't just about aesthetics, it was a means of storytelling, a way to immortalize the myths and legends that defined a culture. Take the frescoes of Akrotiri in the Aegean, for example. These vibrant murals depict everything from religious ceremonies to bustling marketplaces, offering a window into the daily life and spiritual beliefs of the time. It's like Instagram, but with a better color palette and fewer selfies. And speaking of color, let's bust another myth, the notion that ancient art was all drab and monochrome. In reality, Bronze Age art was a riot of color, thanks to natural pigments derived from minerals and plants. This wasn't just artistic flair, it was a reflection of the vibrant, dynamic world these artists inhabited. The colors told stories, conveyed emotions, and set the tone for the myths they depicted. In this way, art served as both a mirror and a canvas for the cultural and spiritual life of the community. Now, let's talk about cultural exchanges, the ancient world's version of globalization. Far from being isolated backwaters, Bronze Age villages were hotbeds of cultural interaction, driven by those aforementioned trade networks. The exchange of goods wasn't just about economic survival, it was a conduit for ideas, technologies, and yes, even religious beliefs. Consider the spread of the wheel or the alphabet, innovations that revolutionized Bronze Age societies and were shared across borders, much like viral memes today. Archaeological finds, like the aforementioned Uluburun shipwreck, reveal a treasure trove of artifacts that tell stories of cross-cultural contact. From Canaanite jewelry to Egyptian scarabs, these objects paint a picture of a world more interconnected than you might expect. It's a reminder that cultural exchange is as old as civilization itself, a testament to humanity's innate curiosity and desire to connect, learn, and grow. And let's not overlook the alliances forged through these exchanges. Trade wasn't just about goods, it was about relationships, both diplomatic and personal. Intermarriages between different tribes and cultures were common, a way to cement alliances and ensure peace. These unions weren't just political maneuvers, they were vital to the survival of the communities involved, offering a way to share resources and knowledge in a world where both were often in short supply. So, what's the moral of this ancient tale? The spiritual and cultural life of the Bronze Age was a complex tapestry woven from threads of myth, ritual, art, and interaction. It was a world where the divine and the mundane walked hand in hand, where stories were as vital as sustenance, and where the quest for connection and understanding transcended borders and beliefs. As the afternoon sun begins to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village, you're left with the realization that while the gods might have seemed distant, the human need for meaning, community, and connection has always been close at hand. And as we continue this journey through the Bronze Age, remember that the past isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a living, breathing narrative that echoes through the corridors of time, inviting us to explore, question, and learn. So, buckle up, because the story is far from over. There are more myths to unravel, more truths to uncover, and more adventures to embark upon as we delve deeper into the complex, captivating world of our Bronze Age ancestors. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting its warm hues over the Bronze Age landscape, it's time to tackle the stark realities and indomitable spirit of these ancient communities. Living in a world where the whims of nature could make or break you was no small feat. If you think your morning commute is tough, try navigating the complex dance of survival in a time when weather apps were as non-existent as unicorns. Let's start with the environment, a fickle friend and formidable foe. The Bronze Age world was a place where the climate wasn't just a background setting, it was an unpredictable character in the everyday drama of life. Take the late Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, for example. This wasn't just a bad season, it was a cataclysmic unraveling of civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean. Some historians point to a series of severe droughts as the catalyst, a climate crisis that sent ripples of chaos through societies dependent on stable agricultural yields. In places like the Near East, where the average annual rainfall could fluctuate wildly, a few dry years could spell disaster. Imagine relying on rain-fed agriculture in a region where the skies could go silent for months on end. The effects were catastrophic. Famine, social unrest, and eventually the downfall of mighty empires like the Hittites and Mycenaeans. The takeaway? In the Bronze Age, Mother Nature held all the cards, and she had no qualms about shuffling the deck. But here's where the story takes a turn. Human ingenuity. The Bronze Age wasn't just about surviving, it was about adapting. These communities didn't just throw up their hands and surrender to the elements. Instead, they engineered solutions like irrigation systems to keep their crops alive. The Mesopotamians, for instance, pioneered sophisticated canal networks that turned the arid plains of the Tigris and Euphrates into a breadbasket of plenty. These canals weren't just ditches, they were marvels of engineering, some stretching over 1,000 kilometers. It's a testament to the human spirit that, rather than being defeated by their environment, these people found ways to master it. And let's not forget the environmental chess game of resource management. The Bronze Age economy was as much about conserving resources as it was about acquiring them. Take timber, for example. In the absence of Home Depot, wood was a precious commodity, critical for construction, fuel, and even shipbuilding. The Minoans and Mycenaeans, operating on islands with limited forests, had to be strategic about their usage, importing timber through trade to supplement local supplies. This wasn't just foresight, it was a matter of survival in a resource-scarce world. Now, let's address another myth, the notion that these ancient communities were isolated islands of humanity, untouched by the broader currents of change. In reality, they were part of a vast network, interconnected far beyond what you might expect. The Bronze Age was a time of trade routes and cultural exchanges that spanned continents. This global web meant that a drought in Anatolia could lead to grain shortages in the Aegean, or that political upheaval in Egypt could ripple through trade networks, affecting everything from the availability of tin to the flow of luxury goods. This interconnectedness was both a strength and a vulnerability. It allowed for the exchange of ideas and technologies that spurred innovation, but also meant that, when one domino fell, others were quick to follow. The Bronze Age collapse wasn't just a series of isolated incidents, it was a cascading failure of systems intertwined by trade and diplomacy. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected our world has always been, and how fragile that interdependence can make us. But amid the challenges, resilience shines through. These Bronze Age communities didn't just endure, they thrived in the face of adversity. They built monuments that have stood the test of time, such as the pyramids of Egypt and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, towering testaments to human ambition and capability. These weren't just architectural feats, they were symbols of cultural resilience, physical manifestations of societies that refused to be cowed by the whims of fate. And let's not overlook the legacy of innovation. The Bronze Age might seem distant and foreign, but its impact is woven into the very fabric of our modern world. From metallurgy to the written word, the innovations of this era laid the groundwork for future civilizations. The wheel, the plough, the sail, all staples of Bronze Age ingenuity, are technologies that propelled humanity forward, leaving a legacy that echoes through the corridors of history. As you tuck yourself into bed tonight, spare a thought for those Bronze Age villagers who laid the foundation for our modern life. They were pioneers in a world of uncertainty, navigating the complex interplay of environment, economy, and society with a deftness that would make any modern strategist proud. They remind us that while the challenges of the past may seem distant, the human spirit's capacity for resilience and innovation is as timeless as the stars above. So, as you drift off, remember that the Bronze Age isn't just a chapter in a history book, it's a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity. It's a story of grit and determination, of communities that rose to meet the challenges of their time with creativity and resolve. And as we turn off the lights on this ancient world, let's carry forward the lessons it offers. The reminder that in the face of adversity, it is our shared humanity and collective resilience that light the path forward. In the heart of 15th century Istanbul, where the air is thick with the scent of spices and occasionally the less pleasant smell of the Bosphorus, you find yourself caught in the vibrant chaos of empire. The Ottoman capital is not just a city, it's a living, breathing organism with a pulse that matches the relentless pace of expansion. As an aspiring architect here, you're part of a grand narrative that demands the creation of the monumental and the magnificent. Not just buildings, but statements of power and culture. Your day starts early, before the sun has the audacity to turn the city into a furnace. You're off to the madrasa, which is not just any school, but a place where the very foundations of your future are built. Forget about chalkboards and desks. This is where you grapple with the elegant yet unforgiving lines of geometry, the language of builders and dreamers alike. Euclid is your best frenemy, teaching you the secrets of angles and shapes that defy gravity and time. If only he'd made it a tad less perplexing. Calligraphy is another beast entirely, demanding the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a saint. But don't be fooled, it's not just about making pretty squiggles. The Ottomans believe in beauty through discipline, and in a world where your architectural plans must speak as loudly as your buildings, your penmanship is your voice. Mastery here isn't optional, it's your entry ticket to the big league. Once the madrasa releases you from its scholarly grip, the real education begins. Enter the world of apprenticeships, a system older than the empire itself. Here, you're not just learning, you're absorbing the craft from the ground up, quite literally. Your master is both a teacher and a gatekeeper, guiding you through the labyrinth of architectural secrets while ensuring you understand the stakes. Mistakes are costly, not just in terms of pride, but in resources, sometimes measured in gold coins or the number of sheep traded for materials. And then there are the guilds, the secretive networks that hold the power to make or break your career. These are not just fancy clubs, they're the backbone of your profession. Membership is a badge of honor and a necessity. They protect the integrity of the craft and set the standards that ensure the empire's cities aren't just sprawling masses of stone, but living, breathing works of art. The guilds are your mentors, your critics, and sometimes your harshest judges. Istanbul, in its quest for grandeur, is always hungry for more. More mosques, more bridges, more palaces. The empire's expansion isn't just a military endeavor, but a cultural one, demanding structures that reflect its might and sophistication. The sultans are the biggest patrons in town, and their checkbooks are as vast as their ambitions. They want the world to know that this is the center of civilization, where East meets West in a glorious architectural embrace. Your hands sketch the outlines of dreams that will one day scrape the skies, while your mind races with the possibilities and pressures of creating something that will endure for centuries. But let's not get too romantic. The reality is less glamorous. The construction sites are chaotic symphonies of hammering, shouting, and the occasional collapse of a less than sturdy scaffold. Safety regulations? They haven't been invented yet. the odds of surviving a career in architecture might rival those of a soldier on the front lines. You're part of an extraordinary era where each stone you lay speaks to the future and echoes the past. The challenge is immense, but so is the opportunity. As you navigate the bustling streets of Istanbul, dodging merchants and livestock, you realize that you're not just building structures, but crafting the legacy of an empire. And who knows? Maybe one day your work will be the subject of a history lesson, where someone else will marvel at the audacity and ingenuity it took to turn dreams into stone. Your journey as an architect in 15th century Istanbul is just getting warmed up, and it's time to talk about the nuts and bolts of your trade, or rather, the compasses and cranes. Picture this. No fancy CAD software or laser levels, just your trusty compass, a tool that's been around since Pythagoras was a young lad. It's the unsung hero of your toolkit, helping you create those perfect circles and arcs that are the backbone of Moorish arches and intricate domes. And the cranes, oh the cranes. Forget hydraulic systems. These are rudimentary, with ropes and pulleys, powered by good old-fashioned elbow grease. Imagine trying to lift a multi-ton block of Anatolian marble with nothing but manpower and some basic physics. It's like solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded, using only your toes. Speaking of materials, let's dive into the logistics of acquiring the finest stones this side of the Silk Road. Anatolian marble, known for its creamy coloration and durability, was the building block of choice. But it wasn't just lying around for free. This stuff came with a price tag that would make even today's real estate moguls clutch their pearls. A single cubic metre could set you back the equivalent of a small herd of goats, or in more relatable terms, the GDP of a modest village. And then there's the Egyptian granite, shipped all the way from the land of pharaohs. These stones were so dense and durable, they made other rocks look like stale bread. But getting them to Istanbul was no small feat. Picture a logistical operation more complex than planning a royal wedding, complete with barges, caravans, and a trail of grumbling labourers. Now, who footed the bill for these grand projects? Meet your benefactors, the sultans and their entourage of wealthy patrons. These guys were the Elon Musks and Jeff Bezoses of their time, with pockets as deep as their ambition. But don't let the grandeur fool you. These projects were a high-stakes game of chess. The Sultan's coffers might seem endless, but every project had a budget tighter than a drum. You, my friend, had to navigate these financial waters with the precision of a neurosurgeon. One wrong move, and you could find yourself out of favour, or worse, out of work. Budgeting wasn't just about counting coins, it was about resource management. A cubic metre of marble might cost you a king's ransom, but it's worthless if it arrives chipped or late. Enter the unsung heroes of the construction world, the labourers. Coordinating these folks, in an age before email chains and Slack messages, was akin to herding cats. Imagine managing a crew of craftsmen, each with their own quirks and skills, and trying to get them to synchronize like a Swiss watch. It's a miracle anything got built at all. And let's talk about schedules. Today, we have project management software that transforms chaos into neat little Gantt charts. Back then, you had a sundial and a prayer. Deadlines were more like suggestions, and delays were as common as pigeons in a city square. The phrase "Rome wasn't built in a day" could just as easily apply to Istanbul. Labour disputes, weather delays, and the occasional outbreak of plague made sure of that. Yet somehow, through sheer determination and perhaps a dash of divine intervention, these projects marched on. The economic realities of your world were as harsh as they were fascinating. The Ottoman Empire was a bustling marketplace, where every transaction was a dance of negotiation. A block of stone was not just a block of stone, it was a testament to trade routes, political alliances, and the ebb and flow of economic tides. The cost of materials fluctuated like the stock market on a caffeine high, influenced by everything from harvest yields to skirmishes on distant frontiers. It was a world where everything had a price, and value was as much about perception as it was about substance. Your role in all this was part architect, part diplomat, and part juggler. You balanced the demands of your patrons with the capabilities of your workforce and the unpredictability of your supply chains. The stakes were high, but so were the rewards. Each completed project was a feather in your cap, a testament to your skill and tenacity. But let's not sugarcoat it. Sometimes it was more about survival than success, As you walk the bustling streets of Istanbul, dodging merchants hawking everything from spices to silks, you contemplate the enormity of your task. You're not just building for today, you're creating legacies that will stand the test of time. And while the romantic allure of it all is undeniable, the reality is that every stone laid is a battle won, every structure completed a testament to human ingenuity in the face of daunting odds. But enough of the heavy stuff. Let's get back to the grind. Your days are filled with the hum of saws and the clatter of chisels, the air thick with the scent of fresh-cut stone, and the occasional curse from a disgruntled mason. It's a symphony of progress in a world where the only constant is change. And as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city skyline, you take a moment to breathe in the chaos and beauty of it all. It's a good life, challenging yet rewarding, and one that leaves an indelible mark on the pages of history. So there you have it, a glimpse into the daily grind of a 15th-century Ottoman architect. It's a life of complexity and contradiction, where the past and future collide in a dance of marble and granite. As you prepare for another day of orchestrating this grand symphony of stone, you can't help but smile at the absurdity and wonder of it all. And who knows? Maybe one day, long after the dust has settled and the last stone has been laid, your work will stand as a testament to the audacity of human ambition. But for now, it's back to the drawing board. The Sultan's latest project awaits, and it promises to be as grand and challenging as any before. And so we dive into the vortex of imperial ambition, where every stone set isn't just about architecture, but about making a statement. Enter Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror himself. We're not talking about a guy who simply wanted a nice summer house by the Bosphorus. This man was an empire builder, a visionary who saw Istanbul not just as a city, but as the heart of a new world order. And you, my friend, are smack dab in the middle of his grand designs. Now let's talk about Mehmed's piece de resistance, the Topkapi Palace. Sitting on the Seraglio Point like a crown jewel, it wasn't just a home, it was a declaration. This sprawling complex wasn't built overnight. Begun in 1459, it took the better part of 2 decades to complete, constantly evolving to fit the whims of its royal inhabitants. Think of it as the Ottoman Empire's version of the Winchester Mystery House, only with fewer ghosts and more janissaries. But what was the big deal about this palace, you ask? Well, picture a massive complex that could house 4,000 people, complete with opulent pavilions, lush gardens, and enough treasure to make a dragon envious. It was a microcosm of the empire, a place where every tile and column whispered tales of power and prestige. The Topkapi wasn't just about luxury, it was a fortress of diplomacy, a stage for political theatre where allies were wooed and rivals were kept in awe. Mehmed knew the value of a good facade. In a world where appearances could make or break alliances, architecture was as much a weapon as the sword. The strategic location of the Topkapi, overlooking the Bosphorus and the Golden Horn, was no accident. It was a constant reminder to anyone sailing by that they were entering the domain of a ruler who commanded both land and sea. And let's not forget the harem, a place shrouded in mystery and myth, but in reality a highly organized institution that played a crucial role in the political machinations of the court. But let's peel back the layers of gold leaf and look at the less glamorous reality. Being an architect under a sultan like Mehmed was no walk in the garden. The stakes were high, and so were the risks. Fail to impress, and you might find yourself out of favor faster than you can say Byzantine. It's said that Mehmed was not a man to be trifled with. Underperforming architects could face penalties that were more severe than a simple demotion. Imagine trying to draft blueprints with the knowledge that your very life might hang in the balance. Talk about performance anxiety. And then there were the patrons, the movers and shakers who orbited around the Sultan like planets around the sun. These were your clients, your sponsors, the ones who could propel your career to dizzying heights or crash it into oblivion. Each with their own agendas, they were as likely to backstab as they were to bankroll. Navigating this minefield required the diplomacy of a statesman and the cunning of a fox. Sultan Mehmed wasn't commissioning mere buildings, he was scripting legacies. He understood that architecture was the ultimate form of propaganda. It told stories of conquest and culture, of innovation and influence. Structures like the Fatih Mosque, completed in 1470, served as both a religious centre and a demonstration of Ottoman mastery over the arts and sciences. These weren't just places of worship, they were symbols of supremacy, casting long shadows over the conquered cityscape. But before you romanticize the grandeur, remember this: every triumph was built on the backs of countless workers. Behind the glittering domes and intricate mosaics lay a workforce that toiled in the harshest conditions. They were the unsung heroes of the empire, their names lost to history, but their handiwork enduring the test of time. For them, the construction sites were less about artistry and more about survival, each day a battle against exhaustion and the elements. The socio-political landscape of the time was a tapestry of ambition and intrigue where alliances shifted as easily as the sands of the desert. The Ottoman court was a hive of activity, a place where power was as fluid as the ink in your quill. As an architect, you weren't just a builder, you were a player in a much larger game where every decision could tip the scales of history. And let's not forget the economics of empire building. Mehmed's vision required deep pockets, and the Ottoman treasury was both a blessing and a challenge. The Sultan's coffers were filled with the spoils of conquest, but every coin spent was scrutinized. The empire's finances were as complex as a Byzantine mosaic, with revenues derived from taxes, trade, and tribute from vassal states. Budgeting was an art form in itself, requiring a delicate balance between ambition and reality. In this world of opulence and austerity, the architect was both a dreamer and a pragmatist, a creator of beauty and a manager of resources. Your work was your legacy, each project a testament to your skill and vision. But it was also a reminder of the precariousness of your position, where one misstep could unravel everything. So here you are, a cog in the great machine of empire, shaping the skyline of history with each stroke of your pen and each swing of the hammer. The stakes are high, but so is the reward. In a world where architecture speaks louder than words, you are the voice of the future, carving your mark on the annals of time. As you stand amidst the bustle of the construction site, the air filled with the clamour of progress, you ponder the monumental task ahead. You're not just building for the present, you're constructing the dreams of generations to come. Each day brings new challenges and new opportunities, and as the sun sets over the city, casting a golden hue over the ancient stones, you take a moment to reflect on the journey so far. The path is fraught with peril, but it's also paved with possibilities. And so the story continues, with you at the helm, steering the course of history one brick at a time. The legacy of the Ottoman Empire is yours to shape, a testament to the enduring power of human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of greatness. As you stand amidst the clamour of chisels and hammers, the scent of fresh-cut stone mingling with the dust of ambition, you can't help but marvel at the stories these walls could tell. But let's not get too misty-eyed. We've got myths to debunk and legends to dissect. You see, the world of Ottoman architecture is as rich in fables as it is in marble, and nowhere does this blend of fact and fiction swirl more vividly than around the iconic Hagia Sophia and her gravity-defying dome. First, let's clear up a common misconception. The Hagia Sophia wasn't conjured from some mystical ether. Nope, it didn't just pop up like a magic mushroom after a storm. Built in the 6th century by Emperor Justinian I, not an Ottoman project, but one that the Ottomans would later adapt into their grand narrative. Its massive dome was a feat of engineering brilliance, not divine intervention. Sorry, but no genies were harmed or summoned in the making of this architectural wonder. The dome's construction was a complex ballet of physics and ingenuity. At a staggering 31 meters in diameter, it seemed to float above the nave like a celestial canopy. How did they pull off this architectural sleight of hand? Well, the secret lies in the use of pendentives, those triangular sections that transition the circular base of the dome to the square footprint of the building. These weren't just decorative flourishes, they were the unsung heroes, distributing the weight and maintaining the structure's integrity. And while we're on the topic, let's tackle another myth, that the dome's survival through centuries of earthquakes was nothing short of a miracle. The truth? It was more about smart design than divine protection. Those Byzantine engineers knew their seismic stuff, incorporating flexible materials and techniques that allowed the structure to sway without snapping. Like a seasoned boxer rolling with the punches, the Hagia Sophia endured because it was built to bend, not break. Now, let's talk about the Ottomans and their role in this story. When they took over in 1453, they didn't just slap a few minarets on the Hagia Sophia and call it a day. They revered it, understood its significance, and enhanced it. Sultan Mehmed II had the vision to transform this Christian basilica into a mosque, ensuring its legacy through thoughtful adaptation. The Ottomans were practical. They knew a good thing when they saw it. And they saw the Hagia Sophia not just as a building, but as a symbol of their empire, a bridge between the past and the future. But back to the myths. There's a persistent tale that the dome was held aloft by angels, their wings supporting it like an ethereal scaffolding. It's a beautiful image, sure, but the reality is that it was the gritty, grimy labour of countless workers that truly held it up. These were artisans and labourers who, despite the sweat and grime, managed to create something that seemed to defy the laws of nature. If angels were involved, they were the ones in the form of masons and architects, not celestial beings. And let's not forget the stories of divine inspiration. Legends speak of architects receiving visions in their dreams, guiding them to create these masterpieces. Romantic? Absolutely. But in truth, these visions were more likely the result of sleepless nights spent wrestling with geometry rather than divine revelation. The real inspiration came from the relentless pursuit of perfection, from the meticulous calculations and the trial and error learning that comes with pushing the boundaries of what's possible. The practical innovations of the time were often mistaken for magic. Take the flying buttresses, those external supports that seemed to defy gravity. They weren't just decorative, they were structural marvels, distributing the weight of the walls and allowing for more windows, which in turn bathed the interiors in heavenly light. No incantations required, just a solid understanding of physics. In the world of Ottoman architecture, the line between reverence and misunderstanding was a fine one. Architects were seen as both magicians and scientists, their work a blend of art and engineering. They were revered for their ability to transform stone into story, to create spaces where light danced and shadows whispered. Yet they were often misunderstood, their genius attributed to mystical forces or otherworldly guidance. And speaking of misunderstanding, let's address the notion that these architects had it easy, blessed by sultans and showered with riches. The reality? They walked a tightrope of ambition and expectation, where the stakes were as high as the minarets they designed. One miscalculation, one structural failure, and their careers could crumble faster than a poorly mixed mortar. But let's not get too bogged down in the harsh truths. The myths, with all their allure, serve a purpose too. They remind us of the human desire to find magic in the mundane, to see the divine in the details. They speak to our longing for stories that transcend the ordinary, even as the real stories, those of hard work, innovation, and resilience, are often more inspiring. As you stand at the intersection of myth and reality, you realize that the true magic lies in the ability to blend the two, to craft narratives that elevate the ordinary into the extraordinary. It's not about dismissing the legends, but understanding them, appreciating the truths they conceal and the lessons they impart. After all, every myth has its roots in reality, and every reality has its moments of myth. So here you are, grappling with the mysteries of the past while shaping the future. You're part of a legacy that's both grand and grounded, a testament to human ingenuity in a world that often prefers the comfort of myth over the challenge of truth. As you continue your journey, remember this: the real story is often more impressive than the fiction, and in the end, it's the reality that stands the test of time. The myths will fade, the legends will evolve, but the stones will endure. Their silent testimony to the architects who dared to dream, to defy, and to build. As the sun sets over the city, casting long shadows over the ancient stones, you take a moment to reflect on the journey so far. The path is fraught with peril, but it's also paved with possibilities. And with each stone you lay, you write your own chapter in this enduring saga. Stay tuned, because the story's far from over. As the dust settles on the grand narrative of Ottoman architecture, it's time to zoom out and see the bigger picture. You've been knee-deep in marble dust and architectural blueprints, tracing the footsteps of Ottoman architects who dared to dream big in a world that often tried to keep them small. But what happens when the echoes of their hammer and chisel fade? Let's talk about legacy, the kind that doesn't just survive but thrives through centuries of chaos and change. First, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the minaret, in the room. Ottoman architecture is not just a relic of the past, It's a living, breathing influence that's echoed through time. These structures have endured more earthquakes than a Hollywood disaster movie set. Take the iconic Hagia Sophia, for example. Since the 15th century, it's been shaken more times than a bartender's cocktail. Yet, it stands, a testament to the genius that combined aesthetics with structural ingenuity. When the earth rumbled, those Byzantine and Ottoman engineers probably whispered, "Bring it on," but don't think it's just about standing tall amidst seismic tantrums. These buildings have witnessed wars, revolutions, and the ebb and flow of empires. The Topkapi Palace, for instance, isn't just a symbol of Ottoman grandeur, it's a survivor of sieges and political coups. Each scar on its walls is a story, each crack a chapter in the tumultuous history of the region. The Ottomans understood that a building was more than just stone and mortar. It was a fortress, a refuge, and sometimes a battlefield. Now, let's talk about how these masterpieces have shaped global architecture. Picture this. You're an architect in the 17th century, eyeing the sleek, soaring minarets and intricate mosaics of Ottoman mosques. You can't help but feel a stir of inspiration, or maybe envy. The Ottomans didn't just build, they set trends. Their fusion of Byzantine, Persian, and Islamic designs created a blueprint that architects from Europe to Asia couldn't resist borrowing or outright copying. The influence of Ottoman architecture can be seen in everything, from the Baroque flourishes of European palaces to the symmetrical splendor of Mughal gardens. It's like the Ottoman Empire had a Pinterest board before Pinterest was cool. But let's not sugarcoat it. Not every stone laid was a stroke of genius. There were, of course, the occasional architectural flops, those projects that, let's say, didn't quite make it past the prototype stage. But even in their failures, Ottoman architects learned and adapted, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They understood that innovation was a messy, often frustrating process, full of trial and error. It's like they were the Silicon Valley of their time, minus the tech bros and kombucha. Speaking of boundaries, the Ottomans were masters at blending beauty with functionality. It's a duality that's often overlooked in the romanticized narratives of the past. Sure, the intricate tile work and soaring domes were easy on the eyes, but they also served practical purposes, cooling vast halls, improving acoustics, and even symbolizing heaven itself. This wasn't just architecture, it was storytelling through structure, a way to convey power, faith, and artistry all at once. The genius of Ottoman architecture lies in its unapologetic embrace of complexity. Each mosque, palace, and public building was a microcosm of the empire itself, a blend of cultures, religions, and ideas. These structures were not just homes for sultans or places of worship. They were the very fabric of Ottoman society, woven with threads of innovation and tradition. Yet, for all their brilliance, the architects themselves often remain unsung heroes. Their names might not roll off the tongue like Da Vinci or Michelangelo, but their contributions are no less monumental. These were visionaries who worked behind the scenes, turning sultans' dreams into reality with little more than a compass and a prayer. Their legacy is etched into the skyline of Istanbul and beyond, a silent testament to their skill and tenacity. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of 15th century Ottoman architecture, it's worth reflecting on the enduring nature of their achievements. These structures are more than just historical artifacts, they are living testaments to human creativity and resilience. In a world that often seems obsessed with the new and the now, it's comforting to remember that some things, like the beauty and ingenuity of Ottoman design, are timeless. So, next time you find yourself gazing at the graceful arches of a mosque or the intricate patterns of an Ottoman tile, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of those unsung architects. They may have worked in the shadows, but their impact continues to shine, illuminating not just the past, but also the possibilities of the future. And as you drift off to sleep with visions of minarets and mosaics dancing in your head, remember, history is not just about the stories we tell, but the ones we build, one stone at a time. Ancient Babylon, where the days were long, the gods were many, and the festivals? Well, let's just say they made Burning Man look like a quiet weekend in the park. If you've ever wondered how to throw a party that's both a calendar event and a power play, you might want to take notes. The Babylonians knew how to keep things lively, and they did it with a mix of divine devotion and some good old-fashioned political savvy. It all starts with the ziggurat, that towering, multi-tiered cake of mud bricks that dominated the skyline like an ancient skyscraper. It's the kind of place where you'd expect to find a holy selfie station for the gods. At the heart of Babylonian festivities was this architectural marvel, a place where the divine and mortal realms were said to meet. And when the Babylonians threw a festival, they didn't just invite the neighbours. Nope, they rolled out the welcome mat for the gods themselves, complete with parades, prayers, and a whole lot of pomp. These festivals weren't just about keeping the gods entertained, though that was certainly on the agenda. They were also about keeping the economy humming along. You see, Babylonian festivals were like the Black Friday of the ancient world. They injected a hefty dose of commerce into the community, with traders setting up shop to sell their wares to the influx of visitors. It wasn't just a religious event, it was an economic boon. Merchants, artisans and farmers all got a piece of the action, driving the local economy with the kind of gusto you'd expect from a modern-day Yelp review of a 5-star event. And let's not forget the political angle. In Babylon, festivals were as much about power as they were about piety. The ruling class used these celebrations to reinforce their authority, showcasing their ability to command resources and orchestrate grand events. It was a chance to flex political muscle and remind everyone just who was in charge. Think of it as an ancient PR campaign, complete with the obligatory grandstanding and a side of divine endorsement. But what really set Babylonian festivals apart? The sheer scale of the spectacle. Picture this. Giant statues of gods paraded through the streets, priests and priestesses dressed in their finest, and a city buzzing with anticipation. The Babylonians didn't do things by halves. If they were going to honor Marduk, their chief deity, they were going to do it with all the flair of a modern-day awards show. And while the gods may have been the official guests of honor, there was plenty of divine drama to keep things interesting. The priests, those ancient spin doctors, had a hand in orchestrating events that would make even the most seasoned political strategists green with envy. They staged elaborate rituals designed to curry favor with the gods, while also ensuring they kept their earthly patrons happy. It was a delicate balance of power and spirituality, and the priests walked that tightrope with the skill of a Cirque du Soleil performer. Now, let's talk numbers. The Babylonian New Year festival, known as Akitu, was a 12-day extravaganza that kicked off with the vernal equinox. This wasn't a one-day affair, it was a marathon of merriment and ritual. The first 4 days were reserved for preparation. Priests recited ancient hymns, purifying the city and its temples. It was a bit like the ancient world's version of spring cleaning, only with more chanting and fewer brooms. When day 5 rolled around, things kicked into high gear. The king, that ever-important figure, would leave the city to perform sacred rites in a small temple outside Babylon. He'd return on day 6, symbolically bringing Marduk back to the city. It was a pivotal moment, a theatrical performance where the king played the starring role. And like any good play, it was all about the audience's reaction. The king's apparent humility, bowing before the statue of Marduk and receiving a symbolic slap from the high priest, was meant to show his subservience to the gods, thereby reinforcing his legitimacy as ruler. The festival climaxed on day 8, when Marduk's statue was paraded to the Akitu house, a ceremonial building outside the city walls. This wasn't a small affair. The statue, likely weighing as much as a small elephant, was transported on a lavishly decorated boat. It was an exercise in logistics that would make a modern-day event planner sweat. The Babylonian priests weren't just managing a festival, they were orchestrating an epic display of religious devotion and political theatre. By the festival's end, Babylon was buzzing, not just from the religious fervour, but from the economic activity it generated. The locals and visitors alike spent their shekels on food, drink, and trinkets, much to the delight of the merchants. It was a whirlwind of activity, a dizzying blend of devotion and commerce that left everyone with a sense of awe and, quite possibly, a wicked hangover. So, what's the takeaway here? The Babylonians knew how to throw a bash that was equal parts spiritual and strategic. Their festivals were a heady mix of divine homage, economic opportunity, and political maneuvering. It was a dance of power and piety that kept the ancient city vibrant and its gods appeased. And while we might chuckle at the thought of a 12-day party dedicated to a statue, there's no denying the impact these events had on the social and economic fabric of Babylon. They were more than just dates on a calendar. They were the lifeblood of a civilization that knew how to blend devotion with a healthy dose of drama. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of Babylonian festivities, the city wasn't just recovering from a spiritual high, it was gearing up for the grand finale of the Akitu festival. But hold on to your ceremonial hats, because this is where the plot thickens. Imagine that ancient drama where the king, that emblem of divine favor and earthly power, took a humbling step down from his pedestal. No, this wasn't a royal resignation or an ancient coup d'etat. It was part of a ritual that would make Game of Thrones look like a tea party. Here's the deal. During Akitu, the king was temporarily dethroned. Yep, you heard right. He had to shed his royal insignia and face a symbolic slap from the high priest. This wasn't just some bizarre ancient hazing. It was a potent reminder that even the mightiest ruler was subservient to the gods. The act served as a reset button for the kingdom, a theatrical gesture to ensure cosmic order was maintained. It was both a humbling experience and a public relations masterstroke, because nothing says, "I'm the rightful ruler," like a good old-fashioned symbolic humiliation. But the king wasn't the only one shedding tears. Enter the crying priests, who took their emotional performances quite literally. These priests were tasked with lamentation, shedding real tears as part of the elaborate rituals. And while it might sound like a job for the Oscar nominees of the ancient world, these tears had a purpose. They were meant to symbolize the grief over Marduk's temporary absence and the chaos that his departure could unleash if not properly managed. It was a sobering reminder of the delicate balance between order and chaos, life and death, that hung over Babylon like a moody rain cloud. Now, let's talk logistics. A word that tends to make eyes glaze over, but stick with me, because Babylonian logistics were nothing short of epic. Picture organizing a 12-day festival in a city where the guest list included the divine, the royal, and the everyday folk, all while keeping the wheels of commerce turning. The economic machinery behind Akitu was as intricate as a Swiss watch. This wasn't just a spiritual shindig. It was a colossal enterprise. Consider the sheer number of sacrifices required. We're talking about the kind of offerings that would give Peter nightmares. Hundreds of sheep, cattle, and birds were sacrificed, their lives given to appease the gods and ensure the prosperity of the city. The scale of these sacrifices was enough to make any ancient accountant's abacus spin. Each offering had a price tag, and the costs added up quickly. But in Babylon, the gods' favor was deemed worth every shekel. The festival wasn't just a drain on resources, it was also an investment in the city's future. The influx of visitors meant bustling trade, with merchants peddling goods from far and wide. It was a chance for Babylon to show off its wealth and sophistication, a reminder that it was the cultural and economic hub of the ancient world. Artisans, traders and farmers all benefited from the increased demand, turning the festival into a marketplace as vibrant as a modern-day bazaar. And let's not forget the logistics of moving Marduk's statue, a masterpiece of engineering and manpower. Transporting this divine effigy on a boat through the city's canals was no small feat. It required precision, strength, and a fair bit of luck. The boat itself was a marvel, decorated with gold and precious stones, a floating testament to Babylon's grandeur. It was a spectacle that drew crowds and dropped jaws, a visual reminder of the city's devotion and organizational prowess. But why go to such lengths? Because in Babylon, every ritual, every sacrifice, and every tear shed was a critical piece in the cosmic puzzle. These were not just acts of devotion, they were strategic moves in a divine game of chess. The festival reinforced the king's legitimacy, appeased the gods, and stimulated the economy. It was a multi-layered event that kept the city's heart beating and its people united under the gaze of their celestial patrons. Yet amidst the grandeur and the drama, there was a deeper reality. The Babylonians were acutely aware of their place in the grand scheme of things. The rituals, for all their pageantry, were rooted in a recognition of human vulnerability and the unpredictable nature of the cosmos. They were a testament to the Babylonian resolve to maintain order in a world that was constantly on the brink of chaos. So, what do we take from this ancient extravaganza? The Akitu festival was a masterclass in balancing piety with pragmatism. It was a reminder that behind every myth and legend lies a kernel of truth about human nature and the eternal quest for meaning and stability. The Babylonians may have lived thousands of years ago, but their understanding of power, faith, and community resonates even today. And as we dive deeper into the story of Akitu, remember, history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the people who lived it, the choices they made, and the world they shaped, one festival at a time. And so, as the echoes of the Akitu festival linger in Babylonian memory, let's delve into the beating heart of these celebrations, the social dynamics that turned this ancient bash into a true communal affair. Forget the notion that these festivals were just a royal-sponsored spectacle. They were a microcosm of Babylonian society itself, with every stratum, from slaves to sovereigns, playing their part in this grand narrative. Now, you might think that slaves were relegated to the background, but Babylonian festivals were a stage where social norms could flip like a coin. For a brief moment, roles could be swapped, and the hierarchies that structured daily life were suspended. During these celebrations, the order of the universe was turned on its head, and a slave might just find themselves dining in style while their master took on a more subservient role. This wasn't just some early precursor to a theatrical production, it was a symbolic gesture of reversing the norm to ensure that cosmic balance was restored. Imagine the scene: a slave, who on any other day would be laboring under the sun, sitting at a table piled high with the finest meats and wines. Meanwhile, their master, perhaps accustomed to giving orders, is now serving them. It was a temporary but potent reminder that in the eyes of the gods, everyone had a part to play, sometimes the opposite part to what they were used to. It's a bit like the medieval concept of the Feast of Fools, but with a Babylonian twist and a lot more at stake. Yet, let's not romanticize this too much. The reality was that these role reversals were brief interludes in an otherwise rigidly stratified society. Once the festivities ended, everyone returned to their usual positions in the social pecking order. The king, who had momentarily been humbled, was once more the divine representative on earth. The slaves, who had tasted a fleeting freedom, went back to their labors. The cosmic reset was complete, and life continued, albeit with a few more stories to tell around the communal hearth. And what about the kings and nobles? Well, even they were not immune to the topsy-turvy world of festival dynamics. The king's temporary dethronement was more than just a ritual humiliation. It served as a public reminder of the divine order. By stepping down and showing fealty to the gods, the king reaffirmed his right to rule. It was a shrewd political move, wrapped in spiritual garb, but beyond the pomp and circumstance, it was a clever way to keep the social fabric intact. After all, a king who could show humility was a king who could be trusted, or so the thinking went. But why did the Babylonians go to such lengths? Because festivals like Akitu were the glue that held their society together. They were a chance to reinforce social bonds, to remind everyone of their place within the cosmic order, and to ensure that even the most humble citizen had a stake in the grand narrative of Babylon. It was a heady mix of entertainment, religion, and social engineering, with the power to unite or divide at a moment's notice. Now, let's talk about the myths that have come to surround these gatherings. It's tempting to picture Babylonian festivals as a constant whirlwind of joy and revelry, a never-ending parade of music, dance, and divine favor. But the truth is far more complex. Yes, there were moments of joy-grand parades, vibrant markets, and raucous celebrations that would put any modern carnival to shame. But these festivals were also times of deep reflection and solemnity. The rituals, the sacrifices, and the symbolic acts of humility were reminders of the ever-present tension between order and chaos. Still, there's no denying the appeal of the romanticized version. Who wouldn't want to believe in a world where gods walked among men, where social hierarchies could be upended with a wave of a ceremonial hand, and where the city's very fate hung in the balance of a 12-day party? But behind the legend lies a more sobering reality. These festivals were not just about celebration, they were about survival, ensuring that the city remained in the gods' good graces and that the social order was maintained. Economically, the festivals were a boon. They were a chance for the city to flex its commercial muscles and for merchants to make a tidy profit. But they were also a strain on resources, with the need to feed and house thousands of visitors. It was a delicate balancing act, and one that required careful management and planning. The logistics of such a large-scale event were daunting, and the success of the festival was as much a testament to Babylonian organizational prowess as to divine favor. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these festivals was their ability to act as a social leveler. In a world where the divide between rich and poor was as wide as the Euphrates, the festival offered a fleeting glimpse of equality. For a few days, everyone was part of something bigger, something that transcended the mundane concerns of everyday life. It was a reminder that, beneath the layers of social stratification, everyone shared a common humanity. As we leave the vibrant streets of Babylon behind, we're left with a clearer picture of what these festivals meant. They were not just grand spectacles or religious obligations, they were a reflection of a society's values, its fears, and its hopes. And in the end, they were a testament to the enduring power of community. The Babylonians understood that a city wasn't just a collection of buildings and people, it was a living, breathing entity, held together by the shared experiences of its inhabitants. And as they celebrated the Akatu, they were also reaffirming their place in the cosmos, a place that resonated with meaning and purpose. So, while the myths may paint a picture of endless joy and divine favor, the reality was more nuanced. These festivals were about balance between chaos and order, between divine favor and human effort, between the past and the future. They were a celebration of life in all its complexity, a dance of power and piety that continues to captivate our imaginations even today. And as we prepare to dive deeper into the next chapter of this ancient saga, remember, history is not just a series of events. It's the story of the people who lived them, their triumphs and their struggles, all woven together in the rich tapestry of time. As the festival's drums fade, we're left to ponder the deeper essence of these Babylonian celebrations. Sure, they were a grand, over-the-top mix of religion, politics and commerce, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking they were all about merriment. Underneath the parades and feasts was a potent cocktail of superstition and shrewd political maneuvering, a blend that kept the gods appeased and the social order intact. Take the priests, for instance. These guys weren't just there to look holy and chant hymns. They were the original spin doctors, ensuring that the city's divine narrative stayed on script. They understood that a well-timed prophecy or ritual could do wonders for reinforcing social norms and political authority. And in a society where the line between divine favor and human ambition was blurrier than a late-night Babylonian wine festival, this was crucial. The Akitu festival, with its 12-day marathon of rituals, wasn't just a religious celebration, it was a masterclass in social engineering. The priests orchestrated elaborate ceremonies that were designed to reinforce the king's authority while reminding everyone of their place in the cosmic pecking order. They were the directors of a divine drama, where every chant and every offering was a cue in a play that ensured the gods and the king remained unchallenged. But let's not forget the superstitions that ran rampant through these rituals. The Babylonians believed that their gods were as capricious as a cat with too much catnip, and they went to great lengths to keep them happy. Imagine a world where a solar eclipse could send the city into a tizzy, or where a bad dream could derail an entire festival. In this context, the rituals weren't just for show, they were insurance policies against divine wrath. And boy, did they pay a premium. The sacrifices alone, hundreds of animals over the course of the festival, were enough to keep ancient Babylonian accountants up at night. The economy of sacrifice was as strategic as it was spiritual. Each animal had a specific purpose, a divine IOU to keep the cosmic balance in check. It was a costly but necessary part of the festival, a reminder that divine favor came with a hefty price tag. But hey, it wasn't all doom and gloom. These festivals were also a chance for some serious bonding. Imagine the camaraderie among the city's residents as they prepared for the festivities, the shared anticipation of the grand parades and feasts. These events were a social adhesive, a time when even the most lowly citizen could feel like they were part of something greater. It was a rare moment of unity in a society that was otherwise as hierarchical as a corporate ladder. Yet, let's not gloss over the political gamesmanship at play. The king's temporary dethronement was more than just a ritualistic slap in the face, it was a brilliant piece of political theatre. By showing humility before the gods, the king was reaffirming his divine mandate, ensuring that his rule was seen as legitimate in the eyes of both the divine and the mortal. It was a strategy that Machiavelli himself would have applauded: keep your friends close and your gods closer. But what about the myths that have woven their way into our understanding of these ancient festivals? The romantic idea of gods mingling with mortals, of a city united in joyous celebration is undoubtedly appealing. But reality was far more nuanced. These festivals were as much about fear as they were about fun. Fear of divine displeasure, fear of political instability, fear of the unknown forces that governed their world, and yet this fear was a powerful motivator. It drove the Babylonians to create rituals that were as elaborate as they were effective, ensuring that their society remained ordered in a world teetering on the brink of chaos. The rituals were a testament to human resilience, a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, people have always sought to forge a sense of control. It's easy to romanticize the past, to see these festivals as mere relics of a bygone era. But in reality, they were a sophisticated system of checks and balances, a way to maintain order in a world where the whims of gods and men were as unpredictable as the Euphrates in flood. The Babylonians knew that their society was a delicate dance between chaos and order, and their festivals were the music that kept everyone in step. So, what do we take away from all this? Perhaps it's that the Babylonians, for all their superstition and ritual, understood something fundamental about human nature. They grasped that people need stories, symbols, and ceremonies to make sense of their world. And in the grand tapestry of history, their festivals were not just about honoring the gods. They were about honoring the very essence of what it means to be human. As we prepare to delve deeper into the mysteries of Babylonian life, remember that these ancient rituals were not just about the distant past. They were about the timeless quest for meaning, a quest that continues to resonate through the ages. So, buckle up, because the journey is far from over. The Babylonians may have left the stage, but the echoes of their festivals still reverberate, reminding us that history is not just a collection of facts and dates, but a living, breathing story that we are all a part of. As we leave behind the swirling dust of Babylonian rituals, it's time to fast forward a bit and see just how these ancient jamborees left their mark on history. Now, if you think the Babylonians were just some ancient party planners with a penchant for over-the-top festivities, think again. They were the OGs of festival culture, and their legacy is the gift that keeps on giving, like a fruitcake that never goes stale. Let's start with the Romans, those legendary empire builders who were never shy about borrowing a good idea. When it came to festivities, they took a leaf, or rather, a whole scroll from the Babylonians' book. The Roman Saturnalia, for example, was a week-long riot of role reversals, gift-giving, and general merriment that echoes the social inversions of Babylonian festivals. Just like in Babylon, Roman slaves and masters swapped places, and the social order took a brief holiday. It was a time when even the toga-wearing elite could let their laurel-crowned hair down. And then there's the medieval Feast of Fools, a delightful concoction of chaos where everything you thought you knew about decorum was tossed out the stained-glass window. This festival, too, bears the Babylonian hallmark of social topsy-turvy. It was a time when the high and mighty were mocked, and the lowly had their day in the sun, albeit briefly. The echoes of Babylon's cosmic reset were still reverberating through the centuries, proving that sometimes a little chaos can go a long way in keeping order. But the influence didn't stop at role reversals. Babylonian festivals were also about the grand spectacle, the kind that left crowds in awe and merchants grinning from ear to ear. Fast forward to the modern era, and you see their legacy in events like Mardi Gras and Carnival. These celebrations are a riot of color, sound, and commerce, where the streets come alive with parades and parties, much like the bustling avenues of ancient Babylon during Akitu. And what about those grand parades? The Babylonians knew how to put on a show, with massive statues paraded through the streets, drawing crowds like ancient rock stars. This tradition of grand processions can be traced through to the religious parades of medieval Europe and the modern-day pageantry of events like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The idea that a city could come together not just to watch, but to participate in a communal experience owes much to the Babylonians' flair for the dramatic. But let's not forget the myths that have persisted through the ages, those romanticized tales that give the past its alluring glow. The idea that Babylonian festivals were a time when gods walked among men is as enchanting as it is improbable. Yet, it's a narrative that has endured, perhaps because it speaks to a universal desire to believe in something greater than ourselves. The truth, of course, is that these festivals were as much about asserting human control as they were about divine favor. But who doesn't love a good story where the celestial meets the terrestrial in a dance of cosmic significance? And speaking of dances, let's talk about the human need to cut loose and celebrate, even when times are tough. The Babylonians understood this well. Their festivals were a release valve, a way to let off steam in a world that was as unpredictable as a Mesopotamian thunderstorm. It's a need that transcends time and place, one that's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. Whether it's a New Year's Eve party or a local street fair, the act of coming together to celebrate is a timeless human tradition, a reminder that life's absurdities are best faced with a sense of humour and a touch of festivity. Now, let's bring it all home with a little reflection on what the Babylonians might think of our modern-day festivities. Would they be impressed by our fireworks and light shows? Probably. After all, they knew a thing or two about spectacle. Might they roll their eyes at the commercialization of holidays? Perhaps. Then again, they were no strangers to the economic boon of a well-timed festival. And would they chuckle at our attempts to maintain order while embracing chaos? Most definitely. In their world, the two were inextricably linked, a delicate dance that defined the rhythm of life. In the end, the legacy of Babylonian festivals is a testament to the enduring power of celebration. They remind us that amidst the rituals and the revelry, there's a deeper truth, that we are all part of a grander story, one that stretches back through the ages and continues to unfold with each passing year. So next time you find yourself at a parade, a party, or a festival, take a moment to tip your hat to the Babylonians. They were the original masters of merriment, and their influence is still felt today, proof that the past is never truly gone, it's just waiting for the next dance. The morning sun peeks over the distant hills, casting a golden glow on the bustling streets of 8th century Damascus. You're not just waking up, you're stepping into a world where silk isn't merely a fabric, but a full-fledged currency, trading hands like gold or silver. In this vibrant city, the silk trade is the lifeblood that pulses through every market stall, workshop, and merchant's ledger. Welcome to a place where a bolt of silk might set you back the cost of a small house, and where the clatter of looms creates a symphony that underscores the city's economic heartbeat. The air is thick with the aroma of spices and the chatter of haggling vendors as you navigate through the morning markets. These markets are not just places to buy goods, they are the nerve centers of the city's economy. Here, traders from far-flung corners of the world come to barter, bicker, and boast over the finest silks. Damascus sits at the crossroads of the Silk Road, and its markets are where east meets west, north meets south, and everyone seems to think their bargaining skills are unmatched. Now, let's set the scene with some numbers. Imagine a bolt of silk, a luxurious piece of about 40 yards, costing upwards of 15 gold dinars. To put that in perspective, a skilled craftsman might earn around 2 to 3 dinars a month. So, buying silk is not just a purchase. It's an investment, a status symbol, and sometimes a gamble akin to buying beachfront property in an era of rising tides. Silk isn't just draped on the backs of the wealthy, it's woven into the very fabric of the city's politics and society. Speaking of society, let's talk about your neighbours, the weavers. These artisans are the unsung heroes and sometimes the unsung villains of the silk trade. They're the ones who turn raw silk into dazzling fabrics that make the wealthy swoon. But here's the kicker. Many of them are trapped in a cycle of debt and servitude, their nimble fingers weaving not just silk, but a tapestry of economic disparity. While some might paint a romantic picture of the weaver as a free-spirited artist, the reality is more tangled than any loom. This city, with its reputation for producing silk so fine that it could be passed through a ring, is a linchpin in the great Silk Road network. The Silk Road. More of a silk highway, really, is the ancient world's trade superhighway, a network of routes stretching over 4,000 miles from China to the Mediterranean. And Damascus is like a VIP rest stop, where silk is as common as sand in the desert, yet as coveted as a secret treasure map. But before you get too dreamy-eyed about the glamour of silk, remember this. The silk trade is a gritty business. Let's bust some myths. It's easy to picture caravans of camels serenely marching across the desert laden with bales of silk, but the reality is grittier. These journeys were perilous, fraught with bandit attacks, harsh climates, and the constant threat of political upheaval. Merchants had to be as tough as the leather soles of their sandals, navigating not just physical terrain, but the shifting sands of alliances and trade agreements. And here's another nugget to chew on. While the silk trade brought immense wealth, it also brought its fair share of trouble. The very fabric that lined the robes of kings was also the reason behind countless skirmishes and rivalries. Silk was a symbol of power, and power, as history teaches us, is a fickle friend. The allure of silk could spark diplomatic negotiations or ignite wars, a reminder that the threads of history are often woven with both beauty and brutality. As you meander through the market, you overhear traders boasting about their latest acquisitions, silks dyed with the rarest of colors, made from crushed beetles or exotic plants. This isn't just about fashion, it's about flaunting wealth, showing off to your peers, and maybe even catching the eye of someone important. In a city like Damascus, your worth might just be measured by the sheen of your silk and the depth of your pockets. Now, why does all this matter? Because the silk industry isn't just about fabric, it's a mirror, reflecting the complexities of human society, wealth and poverty, beauty and brutality, innovation and exploitation. It's a world where a piece of cloth can change your fortune or seal your fate. And as you stand in this vibrant market, surrounded by the clamor of commerce and the whisper of silk, you're not just witnessing history, you're living it. And speaking of living history, let's dive into the heart of Damascus's silk production, where the magic happens, or perhaps where the sweat and toil transform potential into palpable wealth. Picture this: a sprawling mulberry farm just outside the city, where neat rows of trees stand like soldiers in a formation that's as strategic as a military map. These mulberry leaves are the lifeblood of the silk industry, the gourmet feast for voracious silkworms who, let's be honest, eat like teenagers with a bottomless appetite. Mulberry cultivation isn't just a hobby, it's an art and a science. Farmers meticulously tend these trees, knowing that the quality of the leaves directly affects the silk they'll produce. It's a delicate balance of watering, pruning, and timing, like a high-stakes gardening competition where the prize is a silk thread finer than your patience after a long day. These trees need about 600 to 900 millimeters of rainfall annually. Mother Nature, don't skimp now. And a careful eye to ward off pests that find their leaves equally delectable. Now, let's talk worms. Silkworms are the divas of the insect world, requiring a controlled environment to spin their precious cocoons. This isn't just a bug motel, it's a 5-star resort, complete with controlled temperatures and humidity levels. Imagine maintaining 23 to 8 degrees Celsius and a humidity of 65–75%. No small feat when you're battling the whims of the 8th century elements. Around 3,000 cocoons are needed for just 1 pound of silk. Yes, you heard that right, 3,000. If you ever thought your job was repetitive, try being a silkworm. Once these cocoons are ready, it's time for the grand unraveling. The cocoons are boiled to kill the pupae inside, a process that's as brutal as it sounds, but necessary to keep the thread intact. This isn't just about silk, it's about survival in a fiercely competitive market. A single cocoon can yield up to 1,000 yards of silk filament, which is then spun into threads. It's a process that requires the patience of a saint and the dexterity of a magician. Enter the weavers. These artisans are the rock stars of the silk industry, their looms clattering like the percussion section of an orchestra that's in perpetual rehearsal. A weaver in Damascus isn't just making fabric, they're crafting dreams, one intricate pattern at a time. The weavers use draw looms, an innovation borrowed from the Chinese, which allow for complex designs and patterns. Draw looms require 2 people to operate, one to manage the intricate patterns and the other to shuttle the weft thread. It's a 2-person tango, and if you think you've got coordination issues, try doing this dance without stepping on your partner's toes. A skilled weaver might produce about 1 meter of silk per day. Yes, a single, solitary meter. This is not mass production, it's bespoke craftsmanship. The weaver's fingers move like lightning, their eyes trained to spot imperfections that could mar the entire fabric. It's a high-stakes game of attention to detail, where one wrong move could unravel more than just thread. It could unravel a reputation built over years. And then there are the dyers, the unsung chemists of the textile world. They transform plain silk into vibrant hues using natural dyes derived from plants, minerals, and insects. Imagine colors so vivid they could make a peacock envious. Indigo, madder, kermes. These names sound like characters in a fantasy novel, but they're the real deal. Dyers guard their recipes like state secrets, knowing that the right shade could make or break a sale. The process involves not just skill, but a bit of alchemy, as they mix ingredients in giant vats, hoping to achieve the perfect hue. It's a craft where science meets art and where a single miscalculation could turn a masterpiece into a muddle. Once the fabric is woven and dyed, it's time for the merchants to step in. These savvy traders are the connectors of this intricate web, ensuring that the silk finds its way from the looms of Damascus to the robes of royalty across continents. A merchant doesn't just sell silk, they sell a story, a piece of the exotic, a slice of luxury that's as intoxicating as a heady perfume. They travel with their wares along the Silk Road, braving deserts, mountains, and the occasional band of thieves who see their bales of silk as a lottery win on legs. Merchants are the deal-makers of their day, negotiating prices, securing routes, and occasionally greasing the right palms to ensure safe passage. They're the original networkers, building alliances and navigating the complex political landscapes of the regions they traverse. Each bolt of silk they sell is a testament to their skill and resilience, a reward for their ability to turn risk into reward. And while silk drapes the backs of emperors and empresses, it's the combined toil of farmers, weavers, dyers, and merchants that make it possible. It's a supply chain that's as intricate as the patterns woven into the fabric, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of beauty and wealth. So next time you admire a piece of silk, remember the story woven into its threads, a story of labor, love, and a little bit of lunacy. Because in the end, isn't that what history is all about? Let's shift focus from the bustling markets and the hands-on craftsmanship to the grand stage of power and persuasion. Silk, in the hands of the Umayyad Caliphate, was more than just a fabric. It was a diplomatic weapon, a statement of opulence, and a currency of influence. Imagine this. You're a foreign dignitary, seated at a lavish banquet in the heart of Damascus. The table is groaning under the weight of gold and silver platters, overflowing with the finest delicacies the Caliphate has to offer. But as impressive as the feast is, it's the silk draped across the walls, tables, and even your own shoulders that truly dazzles. Now, the Umayyads, who ruled from 612 to 750 CE, were no strangers to the game of politics. They understood that power wasn't just wielded on the battlefield, it could be woven into the very threads of their society. And what better way to showcase that power than by wrapping their empires and their allies in the most luxurious silk? This wasn't just about showing off, it was about sending a message. We are wealthy, we are powerful, and we have the resources to prove it. Consider the Caliphate's strategic use of silk in their diplomatic arsenal. They didn't just hoard it for themselves, they gave it away. Selectively, of course. Gift-giving was a time-honored tradition in diplomatic circles, and silk was the gift that kept on giving, prestige that is. When the Umayyads wanted to impress or woo a potential ally, they'd send a lavish gift of silk, sometimes enough to clothe an entire court. It was like giving someone the keys to a luxury sports car today. Except, instead of horsepower, it was all about thread count. Take, for instance, the story of a diplomatic mission to the Tang dynasty in China. The Umayyads sent gifts of silk so lavish, it was said the Chinese were left both impressed and slightly envious. This wasn't just about generosity, it was about establishing a presence, a foothold in the delicate dance of international relations. Silk, in these exchanges, was both the olive branch and the power play. But it wasn't just about buttering up allies. Silk also served as a not-so-subtle reminder to rivals of the Caliphate's wealth and sophistication. Imagine being a rival leader, receiving a gift of Damascus silk. It was a bit like receiving a wish-you-were-here postcard from a rival vacationing on a private island. The message was clear. We have what you want, and we can give it or withhold it as we please. Let's not forget the role of silk in internal politics. The Caliphate used silk to reinforce the social hierarchy. The elite wrapped themselves in the finest silk, a visual cue that they were a cut above the rest. It was a fabric that could quite literally make or break reputations. A courtier wearing silk was a courtier to be reckoned with. And for those aspiring to climb the social ladder, acquiring silk wasn't merely a fashion statement, it was a necessity. The caliphs themselves were decked out in silk, of course. Their robes were a tapestry of wealth, status, and divine authority. The color, the pattern, and the quality of the silk all conveyed messages to those who dared to look. A caliph draped in silk was a caliph draped in power, and in a world where appearances mattered as much as actions, that was everything. Now, let's bust some myths. It's easy to romanticize these silk-draped banquets, imagining them as serene gatherings of dignified elites. But the reality? These were high-stakes affairs where alliances were forged and broken, where a misplaced word or a misplaced dessert fork could lead to diplomatic disaster. And behind every piece of silk was a network of trade, politics, and occasionally espionage. Silk wasn't just a tool of diplomacy, it was a tool of propaganda. The caliphate used silk to broadcast their success, to project an image of a unified and prosperous empire. And let's be clear, the appeal of silk wasn't just about its beauty or texture. Silk was a symbol of technological prowess, a reminder that the caliphate was at the cutting edge of innovation. The ability to produce silk signaled a mastery of complex processes, from the cultivation of mulberry trees to the intricate art of weaving. The Umayyads understood this, and they leveraged it to maximum effect. They weren't just trading in silk, they were trading in status, in influence, in the very fabric of society. The silk trade routes were also routes of power, pathways that carried not just goods but ideas, cultures, and sometimes conflicts. It's a reminder that trade and politics have always been intertwined, that the threads of commerce are often the threads of history. In this world of silk and power, every piece of fabric carried a story, a message, and sometimes a threat. It was a world where the shimmer of silk could be as influential as the sharpest sword, where the rustle of fabric could drown out the clamour of armies. And as you sit at that banquet, surrounded by the opulence of the Umayyad court, you realize that you're not just witnessing history, you're wrapped up in it, quite literally. So, as we continue to unravel the fascinating tale of Damascus's silk, remember that these threads connect more than just fabric, they connect people, politics, and power. The story of silk is the story of humanity, with all its triumphs and its tribulations. And we're not done yet. There's plenty more to unravel. As the silk threads of our story continue to weave through the labyrinth of history, it's time to confront the less glamorous aspects of the silk trade in 8th century Damascus. So far, we've been dazzled by the shimmer and sheen, but let's peel back the layers and see what's beneath that luxurious facade. Spoiler alert, it's not all glitz and glamour. In fact, it's more sweat and grime than you might expect. Let's start with the weavers, those dexterous artisans whose nimble fingers create the intricate patterns that make silk so coveted. You might picture them as creative free spirits, perhaps a bit bohemian, surrounded by beautiful fabrics all day. But the truth? It's a bit more Dickensian than Disney. These weavers often worked in cramped, dimly lit workshops where the air was thick with dust and the constant clatter of looms. It was less about artistic expression and more about meeting quotas, because time, as they say, is money. And in the world of silk weaving, it was all about the bottom line. Consider this. A skilled weaver might earn about 2 to 3 gold dinars a month, the same amount a piece of silk might fetch in the market. That's assuming they were paid in gold, which many weren't. Instead, payment often came in the form of goods or, worse, credit at the local merchant's shop, a system that kept them perpetually in debt. It was a tough gig, and the weavers had little choice but to keep those looms clattering. Miss a day, and you might miss a meal. The romantic image of the weaver as a master artisan? It's as threadbare as the clothing of those who couldn't afford the silk they wove. And what about the hierarchy within these weaving workshops? It was a microcosm of the broader social structure, where the master weaver reigned supreme, often exploiting apprentices and lower-skilled workers. These apprentices, many of whom were mere children, worked long hours for a pittance, learning the craft while shouldering the burden of menial tasks. It's a reminder that child labour wasn't just a blight of the Industrial Revolution, it was a reality long before steam engines and factory whistles. Now, let's talk about the raw materials. The silk threads themselves were spun from cocoons, a process that was less about magic and more about meticulousness. But harvesting these threads was no walk in the park. It involved boiling the cocoons, a process that not only killed the silkworms but also required workers to endure steamy, uncomfortable conditions. The irony? While silk was the epitome of luxury, its production was steeped in discomfort and death. And let's not even start on the environmental impact. Those mulberry trees might have looked serene, but deforestation and land use issues were real concerns even back then. Speaking of mulberry trees, have you ever tried tending to an entire farm of them? It's not as idyllic as it sounds. These trees required constant attention, and the farmers who grew them weren't exactly living the high life. The farmers worked tirelessly to cultivate the perfect leaves for the silkworms. Yet they were often paid a pittance and lived at the mercy of nature's whims. A bad season could mean financial ruin, and there was no crop insurance to fall back on. And then there's the issue of economic disparities. While the silk trade brought immense wealth to some, it also widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots. The merchants and elite flaunted their wealth with ostentatious displays of silk, while the weavers and farmers remained trapped in a cycle of poverty. It's a tale as old as time. The rich get richer, and the poor keep weaving. Now, let's debunk another myth, the idea that the silk trade was a harmonious exchange of cultures and goods. Sure, it's tempting to imagine traders from all corners of the world sitting around a campfire, swapping stories and silks, but the reality was more cutthroat. The Silk Road was a competitive battleground where merchants jostled for the best deals and routes. It was less kumbaya and more survival of the fittest. Bandit attacks, treacherous terrain, and political upheaval were constant threats. Merchants had to be as shrewd as they were brave, navigating not just physical landscapes, but also the ever-shifting political ones. And what about those lavish banquets we mentioned earlier? They were indeed a spectacle, but behind the scenes they were also a strategic chess game. The silk draped across the tables was not just decoration, it was a statement of power and a tool for negotiation. The caliphate used it to assert dominance and foster alliances, but it also served as a reminder of the social hierarchy. Silk was a symbol of status, and those who wore it were keenly aware of their place in the pecking order. So, while silk may have shimmered in the candlelight of Damascus's grand halls, its production was rooted in the sweat and toil of countless workers. It's a story of contrast, where beauty and brutality coexist. The silk trade was a marvel of human ingenuity, but it was also a testament to the lengths people would go to for wealth and status. The next time you admire a piece of silk, remember the hands that wove it and the lives entwined in its threads. As we continue to unravel this complex tapestry, keep in mind that history is rarely black and white. It's woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, and often it's the harsh realities that make the stories worth telling. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the captivating, tangled web of the silk trade in Damascus. There's plenty more to uncover, and trust me, the plot only thickens from here. So, we've unraveled the silk business in 8th century Damascus, thread by thread, exposing the gritty reality beneath its opulent sheen. But what about the legacy of this shimmering fabric? How did the threads spun in those dimly lit workshops end up weaving their way into the grand tapestry of global history? Let's dive into the lasting impact of Damascus silk, a legacy as intricate as the brocades it produced. First off, let's talk global connections. Damascus wasn't just a city, it was a hub of international intrigue. The silk trade wasn't merely about textiles, it was about tying continents together in a network of cultural and economic exchange. Picture a vibrant, bustling silk road where merchants swapped not just goods but stories, ideas and innovations. This wasn't just about commerce. It was about creating a global village long before anyone thought to name it that. Consider the ripple effect of silk. It wasn't just the fabric of choice for the elite, it was a catalyst for cross-cultural encounters. A Tang dynasty official might unfurl a bolt of Damascus silk and marvel at the artistry, sparking curiosity about the distant lands from whence it came. This curiosity wasn't one-sided. As much as the East desired the silk, the West craved the innovations and art forms of the East. This exchange enriched both sides, creating a tapestry of shared knowledge that would shape art, philosophy, and technology for centuries. Then there's the legacy of innovation. The techniques perfected in Damascus didn't just stay put, they travelled. The draw looms used by weavers in Damascus, for instance, were precursors to the jacquard looms that revolutionized textile manufacturing in the 19th century. These innovations were the seeds of industrialization, planting ideas that would one day blossom into the mechanized marvels of the industrial age. It's a reminder that the threads of history often weave through unexpected places. But let's not romanticize the trade too much. It had its darker side. The demand for luxury goods like silk fueled an insatiable appetite for wealth and status, which sometimes led to exploitation and conflict. The power struggles over trade routes were a constant reminder that while silk was beautiful, its pursuit could be brutal. These struggles shaped the political landscapes of the regions they touched, influencing everything from local skirmishes to grand alliances. And yet, the allure of silk persisted, a testament to its enduring appeal. Even today, when we think of luxury, silk is never far from the conversation. It's the fabric of choice for high fashion, a symbol of elegance that's as relevant now as it was then. The legacy of Damascus silk is woven into the very fabric of our modern world, a reminder of the enduring power of beauty and craftsmanship. Now, let's reflect on cultural exchanges. The Silk Road was a conduit for more than just material goods, it was a highway of ideas. Buddhism travelled from India to China along these routes, influencing the spiritual landscape of entire civilizations. Mathematics, astronomy, and medical knowledge likewise flowed along these routes, carried by traders and scholars whose journeys were as intellectual as they were physical. In this global exchange, Damascus played its part, serving as a melting pot where traders, artisans, and thinkers mingled, swapped stories, and shared discoveries. It was a city where the clamour of the market was matched by the chatter of ideas, where the loom of a weaver might sit alongside the scrolls of a scholar. The legacy of this intellectual cross-pollination can be seen in the scientific and cultural advancements that followed, from the Renaissance to the modern age. But here's a curveball. While we often celebrate these exchanges, let's not forget the barriers that remained. Cultural encounters weren't always harmonious. Prejudices and misunderstandings travelled just as easily as silks and spices. The history of the Silk Road reminds us that while trade can build bridges, it can also highlight divisions. The challenge, then and now, is navigating these complexities with an eye toward understanding and cooperation. In the end, the story of Damascus silk is a tale of contrasts, beauty and hardship, wealth and poverty, connection and conflict. It's a reminder that history is woven from contradictions, that the same threads can create both masterpieces and messes. As we wrap up our journey through the silk trade, let's appreciate the complexity of these stories, the interplay of forces that have shaped our world. So, next time you run your fingers over a piece of silk, think of the hands that wove it, the lives it touched, and the legacy it left behind. Remember that every thread carries a story, a connection to a past that's both distant and intimately familiar. And as you drift off to sleep, ponder the ways in which the threads of history continue to weave through our lives, shaping the fabric of the world we know today. You crack open your eyes as the first light of dawn sneaks through the slats of your shoji screen. It's 4th out at AM, and you're already behind. Welcome to the life of a samurai in Edo period Japan, where the snooze button isn't invented yet, and the concept of sleeping in could cost you your honor, or worse, your head. The early bird lifestyle wasn't just a charming quirk, it was a full-on necessity. In a world where the sun's schedule dictated yours, and timepieces were a luxury not yet mass-produced, punctuality was as sacred as your katana. First things first, let's tackle that romanticized notion of the samurai as some kind of Zen warrior monk with endless hours for meditation and swordplay. Yes, samurai were warriors, but they were also bureaucrats, managers, and landowners. By the Edo period 1603 to 1868, in case you're keeping track, they were more likely to be found handling paperwork than slicing enemies on the battlefield. Tokugawa Ieyasu, the big boss who kicked off this era, knew that constant warfare was bad for business. So, he created a society where samurai had to be just as disciplined in peacetime as they were in war. You might think living by the crack of dawn sounds quaint, but consider this. No electricity, no streetlights. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, it was so dark you'd think you were trapped in a cave. Nighttime activities? More like bedtime activities. Your day was jam-packed from sunrise to sunset, and you had to squeeze every bit of productivity out of it. If you thought modern life was busy, try keeping track of time by the sun and a handful of incense sticks. Punctuality wasn't just a virtue, it was practically a superpower. In this era, being late wasn't just rude, it was disrespectful, dishonorable, and potentially life-threatening. Samurai adhered to a strict code of conduct known as bushido, which demanded discipline and respect in all things. The legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi once said, "Perceive that which cannot be seen with the eye," which, in this case, meant knowing when to show up without a clock. Arriving late to a meeting could tarnish your reputation faster than you could draw your sword. And speaking of swords, let's dispel another myth. Samurai didn't carry their daisho, the iconic paired swords, everywhere like some sort of ancient fashion statement. In reality, swords were reserved for official duties or when traveling. At home, you were more likely to be found with a ledger than a katana. But boy, when you did strap on that sword, you better believe it was polished and gleaming, a testament to your discipline and status. Now, let's talk numbers. The samurai class made up about 5 to 7% of the population, a small but powerful minority, and while they were at the top of the social hierarchy, they weren't swimming in money. Most samurai lived on stipends paid in rice, measured in kokua, unit representing enough rice to feed one person for a year. For context, an average samurai might receive 100 to 150 koku per year. Not exactly rolling in dough, especially if you had a family to support and retainers to pay, but back to those crack of dawn mornings. Discipline wasn't just a personal preference, it was enforced from above. Samurai were expected to participate in regular drills and training exercises, even in times of peace. This wasn't just to keep their skills sharp, but also to maintain order and readiness. You know, in case someone decided peace was overrated and tried to shake things up. And let's not forget the societal pressure. Samurai were the epitome of honor and duty, living examples for everyone else to follow. If you were a samurai, you weren't just accountable to yourself or your immediate superior. Your actions reflected on your entire clan. One slip-up, one lazy morning, and you could bring shame to your family name. No pressure, right? So there you are, up before the roosters, preparing to greet the day with all the discipline and focus expected of your station. You might not be facing an enemy on the battlefield, but make no mistake, the challenges of daily life in Edo period, Japan required just as much strategy and cunning. Forget the Hollywood glamour. This was the real deal, where the stakes were high and the margin for error was razor thin. The sun is rising, the world is waking up, and you, samurai, are ready to meet the day head on, every minute meticulously accounted for. And as you brush off the last vestiges of sleep, remember, the discipline of a samurai isn't just about wielding a sword, it's about mastering time itself. As you throw off the last vestiges of sleep and prepare to face the day like a true samurai, it's time to dive into a topic that's less flashy than swordplay, but just as essential, personal grooming. Sure, you might not be swinging a katana at dawn, but trust me, maintaining that iconic top knot isn't a walk in the cherry blossom park either. Now, here's a little shocker for you. Samurai weren't just about slicing through enemies or perfecting their bushido code. They were also masters of the art of grooming. And no, this isn't just about vanity. It's about maintaining that all-important honor. Cleanliness was akin to godliness, and if your hair was a mess or your face was unkempt, you might as well have declared a personal war on your dignity. So, let's pull back the curtain on the world of samurai hygiene, shall we? First on the agenda, the traditional straight razor. This wasn't your granddad's old safety razor sitting in a drawer. We're talking about a fearsome tool that could double as a weapon if you were so inclined. Crafted from the same steel used for swords, these razors were sharp enough to keep any facial fuzz at bay and, crucially, maintain a smooth face. Why so important? Because facial hair was considered barbaric, and the samurai were all about displaying their civilized side. A clean shave was the hallmark of a disciplined warrior, and the act itself was a daily ritual of self-discipline. And what about that quintessential samurai hairstyle, the top knot or chonmage? Think of it as the ancient world's slicked-back power tie. The top knot was more than a fashion statement. It was a symbol of status and readiness. But getting it just right required more than a bit of pomade and a quick comb-through. The hair was oiled and tied up meticulously, a process that wasn't quick or easy, but when done correctly, it spoke volumes about a samurai's discipline and standing. The top knot was such an integral part of the identity that losing it was akin to losing face, almost literally. But here's where we hit a snag with the romanticized image of the samurai as perpetually polished paragons. Sure, there were days when their armor gleamed like the morning sun, but let's not kid ourselves. The reality was that these warriors were often more roughed up than ready for a GQ cover. Samurai life was demanding, and while grooming was crucial, it wasn't always flawless. Picture this: you're marching with your daimyo's army across miles of dusty roads in the sweltering heat, with no air-conditioned salons in sight. You can bet that maintaining that picture-perfect appearance wasn't exactly a top priority. Let's add a sprinkle of economic context to this grooming routine. Remember, not all samurai were wealthy. In fact, many were living on a stipend that barely covered the essentials. The cost of grooming tools like razors and oils could bite into that precious rice stipend, and not every samurai could afford to splurge on the latest grooming gear. This means that while the elite might have had the resources to keep up with the latest trends, the average samurai had to make do with what they had, often relying on homemade solutions and a lot of skill. But here's another twist. Despite the sometimes gritty reality, the myth of the polished warrior persisted. Why? Because legends are always more appealing than the mundane truth. The idea of the samurai as a perfectly groomed, implacable force of nature was a narrative that fed the culture of honor and discipline, even if it wasn't always spot on with reality. In the grand narrative of samurai life, grooming wasn't just about looking good, it was an essential part of maintaining one's honor and social standing. Sure, it might seem trivial in the grand scheme of things, but in a society where appearances could speak louder than words, a well-groomed samurai was a respected samurai. As you continue to prep for the day, remember that every stroke of the razor and every twist of the top knot was an act of dedication and duty. And in the world of the samurai, that was just as important as any battle fought on the field. Now that you've got that top knot on point, and your face smoother than a baby's bottom, it's time to fuel up for the day. And by fuel up, I mean breakfast in the life of a samurai, a meal that's as straightforward as it is essential. Forget the Feast of Champions. We're talking rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables. Not exactly the stuff of culinary legends, but hey, when you're living in pre-Instagram Japan, you've got different priorities. Let's dive into the rice bowl first. Rice wasn't just food, it was practically the currency of the Edo period. Samurai stipends were often paid in koku, which was a measure of rice, not gold coins. 1 koku was enough to feed a person for a year, or so they claimed. Imagine balancing a budget on grains rather than greenbacks. For the average samurai, breakfast wasn't about indulgence, it was about survival. Rice provided the bulk of daily calories, and every grain was a reminder of your place in the economic food chain, literally. Now, onto the miso soup. This wasn't some fancy soup du jour, it was the real deal, made from fermented soybean paste. Miso soup was a staple not just because it was delicious and warming, but because it was practical. The fermentation process preserved the ingredients, and the soup was a reliable source of protein and nutrients. Back then, refrigeration was as mythical as dragons, so fermentation was the next best thing. Plus, miso had the bonus of being a gut-friendly probiotic, long before anyone had heard of gut health or yogurt commercials. And those pickled vegetables? Let's just say they were more about necessity than choice. With limited means of preservation, pickling was the go-to method for making sure your veggies didn't spoil. It was also a way to add variety and a bit of zing to an otherwise monotonous diet. Think of it as the Edo period's way of spicing things up. Pickled radishes and plums weren't just side dishes, they were lifesavers in the dead of winter when fresh produce was scarcer than a samurai without a top knot. Now, before you start thinking that samurai were chowing down like minimalist monks, remember that even this humble meal was a privilege. In a society where the hierarchy was as rigid as a bamboo pole, having a consistent meal, however simple, was a sign of status. Peasants often had to make do with millet or barley, which were far less glamorous staples than rice. So, while breakfast might not have been a 5-course affair, it was still a marker of social standing. Let's take a quick detour into the economics of it all. The Edo period was a time of peace, but that stability came at a price. The Tokugawa shogunate implemented a rigid class structure to maintain order, and the samurai were at the top, but not necessarily living large. While they were paid in rice, they often had to convert it into cash to cover expenses, including the cost of maintaining their armor, weapons, and, yes, even their breakfast bowls. The conversion rate wasn't exactly favorable, and with inflation lurking like a sneaky ninja, many samurai found themselves in financial tight spots. And that brings us to another myth worth debunking, the the idea of the samurai as lavish spenders. The truth is, most weren't throwing elaborate banquets or sampling exotic foods. The image of the samurai as a feasting warrior is as overblown as a sumo wrestler's appetite. Many samurai lived modestly, adhering to a code that valued frugality and self-restraint. Extravagance was frowned upon and could even be seen as dishonorable, a surefire way to earn the side-eye from your fellow warriors. Of course, there were always exceptions. Some high-ranking samurai and daimyo could afford more opulent meals, and their kitchens might feature delicacies like sashimi or tempura, but these were special occasions, not daily occurrences. For the rank-and-file samurai, breakfast was more about efficiency and sustenance than indulgence. Think of it as the ultimate power breakfast, designed to keep you sharp, disciplined, and ready for whatever the day might throw at you. So, there you have it. As you take that last sip of miso soup and polish off the pickles, remember that breakfast in the Edo period was less about culinary adventure and more about grounding yourself in the essentials. It's a far cry from the romanticized image of the samurai, but it's this very simplicity that kept them grounded and focused on their duties. As the saying goes, a warrior fights on his stomach, and in this case, that stomach was fueled by a breakfast that was as straightforward as a samurai's code. And with that, it's time to tackle the rest of your day, armed with a full belly and the discipline that only a true samurai can muster. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to explore in the life of a samurai, from navigating the social minefields of the Edo period to the art of honing one's mind and spirit. But for now, let's see what the world has in store beyond the breakfast bowl. Now that breakfast has fortified your samurai spirit, it's time to stretch those limbs and get into the real meat of the morning, exercise and martial training. Forget your modern gym membership, this is where the action happens. Imagine a workout regimen where the stakes are higher than just squeezing into your favorite pair of jeans. In the Edo period, staying battle-ready wasn't an option, it was a job requirement. First up, let's talk about the morning drills. Picture yourself in a dojo, surrounded by the rhythmic clang of wooden swords, a sound as common as the morning birdsong. Whether it was a crisp January morning or a humid July day, samurai were expected to hone their martial skills daily. The emphasis? Precision, discipline, and a strong whiff of "don't mess this up or face disgrace." You weren't just practicing for a neighborhood duel, this was about embodying Bushido, the way of the warrior, in every swing and stance. And don't think for a second that this was just about swordplay. Oh no, samurai training was more diverse than a sushi menu. Archery, spear fighting, and even horseback riding were all part of the deal. The aim was to be a well-rounded warrior, capable of handling any situation with the finesse of a tea ceremony master, but let's not romanticize it too much. Training was grueling and mistakes were costly. A slip-up with a bow or a misstep with a spear could result in more than a bruised ego. It was a harsh reminder that, while peace reigned, the potential for conflict was never far off. Now, let's sharpen our focus on the katana, the soul of the samurai. Maintaining this blade was as critical as the training itself. Picture this, a sword so sharp it could split a hair, yet so delicate that neglect could render it useless. Caring for a katana was an art form, requiring specialized oils and meticulous polishing techniques. And if you thought sword maintenance was as simple as a quick buff and polish, think again. The cost of materials alone could take a hefty bite out of your rice stipend, with sword oils and cleaning tools being the kind of luxury that made your wallet wince. Consider the economic reality. A top-quality katana could cost upward of 2-3 koku, a significant investment when your annual stipend might be only 100 koku. And while every samurai aspired to own a blade forged by a master like Masamune, the truth was many had to settle for more modest swords. But regardless of the blade's pedigree, it was crucial to treat it with the reverence it deserved, reflecting both your status and your dedication to the warrior's path. The ritual of sword maintenance wasn't just about keeping the blade battle-ready, it was a meditation in itself, a daily practice that connected you to the warrior's spirit. And this is where we debunk another myth, the idea that samurai were always on the battlefield, swords flailing like some feudal action hero. The reality? Most samurai spent more time in the dojo or maintaining their gear than they did in actual combat. It was about readiness and respect, not reckless abandon. But let's not skip over the physical demands of staying in peak condition. Samurai training was a full-body workout before it was trendy, demanding strength, endurance, and flexibility. If you were expecting a leisurely stroll through the cherry blossoms, think again. Samurai fitness was functional, designed to ensure that you could wear heavy armor and wield your weapon without collapsing in a heap. This wasn't just about personal pride, it was an expectation from your daimyo, your feudal lord, and failing to meet it could mean losing more than face. Society held these warriors to an impossibly high standard. A samurai wasn't just a soldier, he was a living symbol of discipline and honor. The pressure to maintain this image was intense. It wasn't just about personal failure, it was about letting down your entire clan. Imagine the weight of your ancestors watching over your shoulder every time you picked up a sword or drew an arrow. No pressure, right? The societal expectations didn't end with physical prowess. A samurai was also expected to be mentally agile, embodying virtues like wisdom, loyalty, and courage. Samurai were trained in the arts and literature, expected to be as sharp with a brush as they were with a blade. The ideal warrior was a Renaissance man of sorts, equally capable in the study and on the battlefield. It was a balancing act that required constant dedication and focus. But let's get real for a moment. While the legend of the samurai is wrapped in glory and honor, the truth is more nuanced. Many samurai struggled to meet these expectations, and the pressure could be overwhelming. There were those who fell short, who turned to debt or even dishonor to cope with the relentless demands of their station. The romantic image of the samurai as a paragon of virtue was indeed inspiring, but it was also a double-edged sword, cutting down those who couldn't live up to the ideal. And while we're slicing through myths, let's address the notion of the samurai as lone wolves, roaming the land with nothing but their swords and their wits. The reality was far more structured. Samurai were part of a rigid hierarchy, bound by duty to their lords and to each other. They operated within a complex web of obligations, where personal ambition was often secondary to the collective needs of the clan. It was a life of service, not self. So, as you wrap up your morning exercises and feel the burn of a job well done, remember that every bead of sweat, every bruise, and every perfectly executed kata is part of a larger tapestry. You're not just training for the sake of training, you're upholding a tradition that has been passed down through generations, a legacy that demands both respect and sacrifice. The life of a samurai was never easy, but it was never dull either. And with the morning routine behind you, the rest of the day awaits, filled with its own challenges and opportunities. Stay sharp, because in the world of the samurai, every moment counts. As you wipe the sweat from your brow and catch your breath, it's time to switch gears from the physical to the mental. Welcome to the part of a samurai's morning that Hollywood often skips, the art of sitting still and doing absolutely nothing, or so it seems. Enter meditation, a cornerstone of the samurai's daily routine that was as vital as any sword technique. Let's peel back the layers of this onion. The Edo period wasn't just about keeping your blade sharp, it was about honing the mind like a whetstone. Zen Buddhism played a crucial role here, emphasizing mindfulness, self-control, and the oh-so-elusive art of inner peace. In a world where a wrong move could cost you your head, staying cool under pressure was more than a life hack. It was a survival skill. So how does one achieve this Zen-like state amidst the chaos of feudal Japan? Enter Zazen, or seated meditation. Picture yourself cross-legged on a tatami mat, focusing on your breath while the world outside is a flurry of obligations and potential warfare. Sounds idyllic, right? But let's not kid ourselves. Achieving enlightenment wasn't as simple as closing your eyes and chanting Om. It took discipline, the kind that could make or break a samurai's reputation. The practice of zazen involved more than just sitting still. Samurai would often engage in koan practice, wrestling with paradoxical questions designed to short-circuit logical thought and spark intuitive insights. Think of it as mental swordplay, where the opponent is your own mind. A classic koan might ask, what is the sound of one hand clapping? A riddle that sounds like the kind of thing you'd hear in a modern mindfulness seminar, but with stakes as high as your honor. Now, before you start picturing samurai as gurus in armor, let's debunk some myths. While the notion of the warrior poet is tempting, the reality was more complex. Not every samurai was a disciplined meditator. Some were more interested in the pragmatic benefits of meditation, like improved focus and resilience, rather than spiritual enlightenment. The philosophical undertones of Zen were sometimes less about nirvana and more about not losing your nerve when facing a rival clan. The economic angle here can't be ignored either. Meditation didn't just help samurai keep their cool, it was a cost-effective way to maintain mental health in a time when therapy was as accessible as a unicorn. With meditation, all you needed was a quiet space and a few minutes. No rice stipend required. It was the DIY mental health solution of the Edo period, a far cry from today's wellness industry with its pricey apps and retreats. And speaking of modern misconceptions, let's tackle the romanticized image of samurai as stoic philosophers, constantly pondering the meaning of life while sipping sake under cherry blossoms. While the appeal of this image is undeniable, reality was far more gritty. Meditation wasn't always a serene escape. It was often a necessity, a mental armor against the chaos of feudal politics and the omnipresent threat of conflict. In Edo society, meditation also served a social function. It reinforced the samurai's role as a model of discipline and moral integrity. In a society structured like a rigid hierarchy, where every action was scrutinized, maintaining mental clarity was crucial. The samurai weren't just warriors, they were expected to be paragons of virtue, embodying the values of Bushido in thought as well as deed. Yet, the paradox of meditation is that it requires you to step back, reflect, and sometimes confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. A process that could be as painful as any battle wound. For many samurai, the practice of meditation was a double-edged sword, offering both tranquility and turmoil. It was a chance to confront inner demons, a necessity in a world where external threats were never far away. As you rise from meditation, feeling a strange mix of calm and readiness, it's clear that the practice was more than a quaint tradition. It was an essential tool in the samurai's arsenal, one that balanced the demands of a tumultuous world. In a society obsessed with outward appearances, meditation offered a rare chance to cultivate inner strength. So, what's the takeaway from this deep dive into the mind of a samurai? Maybe it's the realization that, while the world has changed dramatically since the Edo period, the human need for balance and clarity remains the same. Whether you're wielding a katana or a keyboard, the quest for inner peace is as relevant today as it was back then. And perhaps the samurai's morning routine offers a timeless lesson, that true strength lies not just in physical prowess, but in the mastery of one's own mind. As you step back into the rhythm of daily life, armed with newfound knowledge and a touch of Zen, remember that the legacy of the samurai is more than just a historical footnote. It's a testament to the enduring power of discipline, honor, and the unyielding pursuit of balance. The samurai may have been warriors of the past, but their lessons resonate with the present, reminding us that the battle for inner peace is one worth fighting. And with that, your morning as a samurai concludes, leaving you with insights as sharp as any blade, ready to face the world with the serenity and focus of a true warrior.